Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr.X Files. If you're new here, this is the place where we dive into the mysteries that keep you up at night. Whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or spiral into an existential crisis at 3 in the morning, you're in the right place. Drop a comment, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And yeah, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Alright, let's get into it. Tonight's story is called Project Selene, a conspiracy thriller about forgotten film reels, locked away footage, and a truth buried beneath the surface of history. It starts with the moon landing, or rather, with someone questioning everything. We thought we knew about it. We'll follow Nolan Price, not a hero, not a secret agent, just a quiet, focused man who restores old films for a living. His job is usually simple. Digitize old reels, clean up the sound, fix the color, file them away. But what he's about to find hidden in reels marked Project Selene will begin to peel back the carefully constructed image of one of mankind's greatest achievements. As you listen, let yourself drift into the hum of old machinery, the soft mechanical whir of a film reel spinning, the click of metal spools, and the faint smell of old acetate and dust. Let your mind slip into the flickering grain of analog footage and ask yourself, what if the first step on the moon was filmed under stage lights? Our story begins with a locked warehouse on the outskirts of Houston, Texas. The building was an old, windowless block of concrete, baking under the midday sun. Cracks split the pavement outside like spider webs. A single metal door stood out against the pale wall, rust creeping along the edges. Nolan Price stood in front of it, squinting through the glare, clutching a folded letter. The letter had come from Arcadia Aerospace Solutions, a private aerospace contractor involved in everything from satellite telemetry to climate data analysis. It was formal, brief, and vague. You've been selected to digitize a newly discovered archive of NASA film reels. Immediate start, high compensation, confidentiality required. The pay was oddly generous for simple digitization work. That made Nolan suspicious, but curiosity had always gotten the better of him. A tired-looking security guard stepped out from a shaded booth and gave Nolan a nod. No words exchanged. He was expected. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of old cardboard, mildew, and magnetic tape. Rows upon rows of industrial shelving stretched out under flickering fluorescent lights, each shelf crowded with film canisters and dusty boxes stamped with the NASA logo. Some were warped by water damage, others slashed open, labels faded to near illegibility. Nolan had worked with NASA material before. Their archiving practices had always been a little chaotic. Lost test footage, missing telemetry data, even entire Apollo mission tapes that had supposedly vanished over time. But something about this place felt different, quiet in a way that was unnatural. A woman in a grey suit appeared from behind a side door. Short, precise in her movements, she introduced herself simply. Madison Harlow, I'm Arcadia's liaison. She didn't smile, didn't shake hands, just turned and motioned for him to follow. She led him into a small, dark side room. The walls were lined with soundproof foam and temporary acoustic panels. At the center sat a battered 16mm projector, a spool rewinder, and a digital capture device hooked to a humming workstation, a few folding chairs, a dusty monitor, and a stack of tapes. Harlow gestured to the reels. That's what you're working with. Nolan scanned the handwritten labels. Apollo 11, Raw. Apollo 12, Ava. Saturn telemetry, Hull. Then, one set caught his eye. They were marked in red, Selene B, or SB footage. Your task, she said, is to transfer each reel to high-resolution digital. Flag any anomalies, damaged film, missing audio, that sort of thing. No copies, no public statements. Keep everything internal. Understood. Her tone wasn't unfriendly, but it carried weight, clipped and formal, like someone used to giving orders. Nolan just nodded. Understood, he replied. I've done this kind of thing before. She handed him a keycard and a typed page of alarm codes. We want this done swiftly. There's a schedule. Then she left. closing the door behind her with a click. Over the next few days, Nolan settled into a quiet rhythm. He fed reels into the scanner one at a time, the projector stuttering softly as the film passed through. The first few were exactly what he expected. Mission logs, training videos, pre-launch prep, audio chatter from ground control. The color was faded, the sound scratchy, but it was the kind of thing he'd seen dozens of times. He found it strangely calming. There was something timeless about watching a Saturn V rocket rise against the grainy sky, the way the countdown always carried the same tension. It felt like peering into a piece of living history. Then came day 3, and with it, a reel that didn't fit. It was marked Apollo 11, Stage B. Take 3. Nolan blinked. Take 3? That wasn't how NASA labeled mission footage. And Stage B? What stage was that? He loaded the reel onto the projector, pressed play. At first, the footage looked normal. A wide shot of the lunar module against a dusty, fake-looking backdrop. But something was off. The shadows, the lighting, the way the astronauts moved, almost too precisely. Then came the voice. "All right, reset. That's no good. Too much lag on the lift." The camera jerked. One of the astronauts, or the actor, in the suit, turned around, clearly annoyed. A man in civilian clothes stepped into frame, clipboard in hand. "Let's try that again. Stage B, take 4. Quiet on set." Nolan froze. His stomach dropped. This wasn't telemetry data. This was a film set. He rewound and played it again, eyes glued to the screen. The man with the clipboard, who the hell was he? And why did he sound so official? Suddenly, the door behind him creaked open. Madison Harlow stepped in. Her voice was even. "Everything all right in here?" Nolan clicked pause. The frame froze on the man with the clipboard mid-step. "Yeah," he lied. "Just a rough reel. Bit of a splice jump." She nodded slowly. "Good. Just remember, no duplicates, no uploads. Keep things clean." She left without closing the door completely. Nolan waited a full minute before he exhaled. His hands were trembling. He stared at the frozen image on the screen again, the glare of the studio lights above the lunar module, the unnatural stillness of the moon dust, the figure standing just out of frame, holding what looked like a script. He backed up the footage frame by frame. In the corner of one shot, the edge of a boom mic was visible. Nolan leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. What was this? And more importantly, why was it hidden? The questions began to claw at his mind. What if this wasn't a hoax? What if this was the hoax? The real hoax, buried deep, hidden behind layers of half-truths and Cold War urgency. He played the reel again, eyes wide, breath shallow. Every flicker of the film now felt like it held meaning. Every stutter, every cut, deliberate. Somewhere in the next box was a reel labeled Celine Take 5. He hadn't noticed it before. He reached for it with trembling fingers. Whatever this was, it was just beginning. The reel clicked into place with an unsettling smoothness, as if it wanted to be watched. The room was dim, save for the buzzing fluorescence and the ghostly glow of the projector screen. Nolan's breath was shallow. He hesitated, fingers hovering near the switch. "Do not watch." The words on the reel echoed in his mind like a dare or a threat. But obsession had long since taken root. A technician's curiosity, sharpened by days of anomalies, now burned with the heat of something deeper. The sense that he was standing at the edge of an enormous lie. He powered the projector. Brief static burst, then black and white grain. Not NASA standard formatting, no time code, no color bar, just breathing, close, sharp, rhythmic. Someone was filming, handheld, shaky. The view wavered, then settled on a narrow corridor, dimly lit, pipes along the ceiling. Not a soundstage, not Houston. Somewhere beneath, the camera tilted. A metal door, heavy with rust, bore a faded stenciled label. PSH, Vault 7, Access, Celine. A figure appeared, obscured by dim light. No face, just a silhouette in a lab coat, turning a key. Inside, rows of tapes, stacked haphazardly. One reel stood out, its label smeared in red marker. Final cut, Lunar Truth. The video jumped, static again. Then a flash. A studio, not a set, an entire soundstage. The lunar module was there, under trusses of studio lights. One massive wall painted pitch black, poorly blended at the corners. Someone adjusted a fan to simulate lunar dust drift. Another man in an astronaut suit rehearsed his steps like a Broadway actor. Then came the voice, clear, clipped, and hauntingly familiar. We go live in 1 hour. No mistakes. This is history now. Nolan's stomach turned. He recognized the voice. Archival clips, documentaries, countless hours of Apollo footage. It was Mission Control's own director, revered in every official history. But here he was orchestrating a set, as if the moon were just a camera angle. The reel cut again. Now the camera shook violently. The man filming, perhaps one of the conspirators, seemed to be running. Doors slammed. Distant voices shouted, "You're not authorized!" A scream. Then the reel ended abruptly in a splash of static. Silence fell. Nolan stood frozen, heart pounding like a drum in his ears. The words, "Do not watch," now felt prophetic. A boundary crossed that couldn't be undone. He ejected the reel, palms clammy. Outside the editing room, something had changed. The facility was silent, too silent. No buzz of lights, no flicker of motion. And yet, Nolan felt watched, like eyes tracked his every breath. He grabbed his duffel bag, shoving in hard drives, his notepad, and 2 remaining reels. He moved toward the exit. Click, the hallway light above him flickered out. Another died further down. Then a hiss, like slow radio static bleeding through the walls. The smell of ozone. He broke into a jog. Around the corner he froze. The guard was gone. Only his cap remained on the chair, perfectly placed, as if removed deliberately. The front door had a keypad. He punched the exit code. Denied. He tried again. Denied. Then, from the corner of the hallway, a low mechanical whir began. A security, drone, a camera lens adjusting. He didn't wait to find out. He bolted toward the rear of the facility to the emergency exit Madison Harlow had pointed out on day 1. It opened without resistance. He burst into daylight, heart hammering, half expecting a bullet or a black van. But nothing followed. Just the sound of cicadas in the heat and the empty stretch of road between him and his rented car. That night, back at the motel, Nolan triple encrypted his copies. One on a portable drive, hidden in the motel ice machine. Another uploaded to a private server, rigged with deadmans, switches and staggered email releases in case of his sudden disappearance. He called Arcadia's liaison, Harlow. No answer. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown ID. One message. You saw what wasn't yours. Stop now. You're not the first. A chill swept over him. He didn't sleep that night. The footage haunted his thoughts. The deliberate staging, the whispered instructions, the calculated deception. By morning, his motel door bore no signs of forced entry, yet his duffel bag had been opened. The reels were gone. Only a handwritten note remained inside. Some truths serve no one. Forget Celine. Nolan knew he couldn't. Not now. 1 month later, Nolan Price uploaded his findings to a secure, decentralized network. The tapes, or what little he had managed to copy, were broken into pieces, encrypted, seeded across servers worldwide, hidden in fragments. He used pseudonyms, contacted rogue archivists, conspiracy forums, darknet history groups. Most dismissed him. A few were intrigued. Then the disappearances started. An editor in Berlin, a whistleblower podcaster in Argentina, A Reddit user named A11 Truthseeker went silent mid-thread. Nolan changed names, burned phones, moved cities. Still, he caught reflections. In windows, heard clicks on silent lines. And always, that phrase, "You're not the first." Epilogue. Somewhere in the desert, in a trailer powered by solar panels and paranoia, Nolan watches a degraded clip over and over. The one frame he salvaged that still keeps him up at night. It shows an astronaut, suit smudged, visor cracked, standing alone on a fake lunar surface. In the reflection of the helmet, not Earth, but a studio camera, and behind it, a man with an eye patch, not in any mission log, not in any cast list. Who was he? Was he even human? As the reel ends, the analog flicker fades to black, and Nolan whispers to no one, "What if we never left Earth?" The screen lit, up with static, grey fuzz that hissed and danced, before cutting to a wide shot of a barren crater. A cold whisper, reversed and warped, slithered through the speakers. "This is not for you. Turn back." The footage jumped erratically, flashing clips of old rocket launches spliced with a shadowy image of an older man sitting alone in a dimly lit room. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then, silence. More static. The reel ended. Nolan Price stared at the monitor, unsettled. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, unmoving. What the hell did I just watch? He leaned back, heart thudding, his mind racing. Whatever this was, it wasn't some forgotten training reel or misfiled documentary. The label on the file, Project Selene, sent a chill down his spine. It sounded official, governmental, buried. Could it be real? Was it actual evidence of a staged moon landing? Or was it just an elaborate hoax? A conspiracy video someone pieced together to mess with people like him. Archivists, researchers, curious minds. Still, there was something about the grain, the way the man looked into the camera, like he was warning someone across time. He needed answers. Fast. The only person he could think to ask was Dr. Eliza Trent, a former NASA contractor who had since become a respected historian of aerospace media. She specialized in analyzing space footage and separating fact from propaganda. If anyone could verify the authenticity of what he'd found, it was her. He packed up the thumb drive, double-checked the locks on the archive room, and set the alarm. The reels couldn't vanish again. Not like last night. That strange voice still echoed faintly in his head. We told them we went to the moon. And they believed. He shivered. If what he saw was real, then everything, the moon landing, the heroism, the images carved into humanity's memory, could be fiction. And if it was fiction, someone went to incredible lengths to maintain that illusion. The next morning, Nolan stood in front of a plain brick building in downtown Houston. A small plaque read, Trent Aerospace Consulting. He hesitated before going in. Inside, a bell chimed softly. The office was cluttered but warm, papers stacked high, books spilling out of shelves. A dusty model of the Saturn V rocket on the desk. Dr. Eliza Trent looked up from behind a pile of documents. She was in her early 50s, sharp eyes behind narrow glasses, her greying hair tied back. "You must be the archivist," she said, not bothering to rise. "The one who left that cryptic message last night." Nolan nodded and offered a handshake. "Name's Mark. Well, sort of. I'm here under an alias." "Clearly," she replied dryly, gesturing to a chair. "Let's see what was so urgent." He handed her the thumb drive. As the video played, her brow furrowed. The crater, the silent man, the distorted whisper. Then came the flickering references to Celine B. She paused, rewound, zoomed in on frames. "The suits," she murmured. "These aren't quite Apollo standard. And the flag, see how it doesn't match the 1969 deployment." She scrubbed through the footage, noting timestamps, frame edges, scanning for production lot markers. "This could be damning," she said quietly, "if it's real." but I've seen some impressive fakes in my time. Deepfakes, AI renderings, even Cold War-era propaganda reels passed off as new leaks. Let's check for physical inconsistencies, film stock imprints, stitching on the patches, ID badges. Nolan nodded, then told her everything. The reversed whispers labelled Celine E., the missing reel, how the footage swapped itself out overnight. Dr. Trent sat back, arms crossed. Her expression darkened. "If you're telling the truth," she said carefully, "then someone doesn't want you watching these tapes. And people don't disappear reels for fun." She took off her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. NASA's official stance is that all Apollo mission footage is accounted for. A few gaps due to damage or degradation, sure, but nothing like this. Still, years ago I heard rumors from retired engineers, something about a backup plan, a simulation reel, just in case the actual landing feed failed. Her voice dropped, lower, but no one ever proved it. They spent hours dissecting every second of the tape. One frame caught a mission patch inconsistent with Apollo 11. Another had background audio, barely audible, matching real telemetry angles from an altitude NASA never acknowledged. One face on the reel sent a jolt through Dr. Trent. She pulled up an old team photo from her files. There he was, a man in a dark suit, never on camera during official missions. He was rumored to liaise with Hollywood. Some whispered the name. Kubrick. The Cold War created immense pressure, she said, voice heavy. If they couldn't beat the Soviets by actually landing, faking it could have seemed necessary. But this, she pointed at the screen, this isn't a backup. This looks like a full-scale simulation. She sat quietly for a moment. This could change everything, but you need to be extremely careful. Whoever's behind this won't appreciate you digging deeper. They agreed to regroup after she checked the reel's details against the NASA archives. For now, it was too volatile to act on. Nolan thanked her, then returned to the facility that night. The next morning, everything had changed. Nolan arrived at the archive building only to find it chained shut. A bright yellow sign had been posted. Renovation in progress, no entry. By order of Arcadia contractors. He stared at it, confused, then checked the side door, also locked. "Harlow," he called out, looking around for the liaison. No response, no one. Security guards in navy uniforms stood near a van, arms crossed. One of them spotted him and approached. "Sir, this property is off limits," the guard said flatly. "I work here," Nolan replied. "I need to retrieve something. Just personal effects." "No one enters," the guard repeated. "Orders from above. Project's been suspended." Nolan stepped back, anger rising in his throat. He pulled out his phone, dialed Harlow's number. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. He stared at the building, at the fake renovation sign, and the two silent guards who made no move. To leave. They weren't renovating. They were erasing. Disconnected. Just like that, it was over. Whatever authority controlled the site had swept through swiftly and quietly. Nolan stood outside the archive's locked gates, stunned. The reels were gone. The job, officially or not, was dead. He returned to his cramped apartment in a haze, heart hammering against his ribs. The silence inside felt unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath. His fingers trembled as he locked the door, pulled the blinds, and slid the deadbolt. The tapes were probably seized. All he had left were a few digital files he'd managed to copy beforehand, bare threads of a deeper truth. He sat at his desk and plugged in a flash drive, then another, and another. He made sure the backups were spread across multiple devices, but when he tried emailing the new clips to Dr. Trent, a warning popped up. Transfer failed, file blocked, suspicious content. His blood ran cold. He checked again, same result. He tried uploading to a cloud drive. Blocked. Every device, every method, shut down. Something was watching his system. Something deep, sophisticated, coordinated. The watchers weren't just aware of him anymore. They were inside his machine. Panic, clashed with determination as he scoured through previously digitized reels. Most had already been scrubbed, either by him or corrupted during transfers. But tucked in a neglected folder was a short, unmarked clip. He clicked it. The screen flickered, revealing a man, alone in a tight corner, eyes darting around, lit by a single overhead bulb. His appearance screamed mid-70s. Wide tie, slightly frayed collar, dark bags under his eyes. The film was scratched to hell, and the audio came out in warped, reversed gibberish. Nolan reversed the audio manually and filtered the hiss. The voice was raspy, frantic. Project Selene was never meant to be seen. We built illusions for a greater cause. We lied, or we lost the war. The man coughed hard, doubled over, then looked up directly at the camera. I left the final record in the Saturn archives. Then, static. The clip ended. Nolan sat frozen, whispering aloud. Saturn archives. It could refer to Saturn V rocket logs, but Dr. Trent had already examined those. This had to mean something else. Maybe Saturn Archives was a code name or a separate classified repository entirely. Who was that man? Could he be Red Hand, the rumoured original whistleblower from the early conspiracy circles? Some said Red Hand had vanished after leaking a single photograph in the 80s, a blurred image of what looked like a studio with fake lunar dust. If this clip was genuine, it suggested a hidden cache of footage, somewhere untouched, possibly safer than anything in NASA's official systems. He called Dr. Trent immediately. She answered, breathless and panicked. Nolan, thank God. Listen, they found me. What do you mean? They broke into my home office. Microfilms, my old. NASA logbooks. They took everything. 2 men in dark suits had been standing outside for hours, just watching. He gripped the phone tighter. Who are they? Arcadia Aerospace? It's a shell, she whispered. A front. Probably Black Ops, NSA, maybe even something deeper. We need to meet. Public place. Bring that reel. They agreed on a meet-up, noon, at the central bus terminal. Crowded. Cameras. Witnesses. But the next day, she never showed. Nolan waited hours, scanning every face, heart sinking with every minute. He called her phone, disconnected. He called again, straight to voicemail. That night, 2 reports surfaced, buried under the headlines of the day. 2 NASA retirees, both tangentially tied to the Apollo program, had died unexpectedly. One of a stroke, the other of a heart attack. Too convenient, too fast. The conspiracy forums noticed. A thread exploded under the title, Moon Archivist Missing, Project Selene Heats Up. Scattered posts followed, mostly speculation, except one that stood out. User, Apollo Truth. Comment, look to LB7, the final broadcast is hidden. LB7.Nolan. Froze. In one of the digitized catalogs, he recalled a folder labeled L-Dato that contained fragmented metadata. He pulled it up and dug through the contents. One file stood out, LB7, raw cuts. He opened it. The footage was surreal. Not a moon landing, but a full indoor set. A massive soundstage made to resemble the lunar surface. Multiple rover props, crater backdrops arranged like a film set, shadows inconsistent. A slate board clapped at the start of the scene. A half-legible, script fragment read, "The audience sees only the final cut." Then a voice, clear this time, a man in a lab coat speaking to camera crew. "We can't let them see the starfield difference. Keep it black." Nolan leaned back, stunned. That one line confirmed it. The stars were deliberately omitted to avoid inconsistencies. Not because of science, but to cover something up. The moon landing, or at least parts of it, had been reshot or doctored. The scale of deception was dizzying. The paranoia that had been a whisper now screamed in his head. He noticed a black sedan parked across the street. For the 3rd night in a row, different plates, same model, his buildings. Caretaker, a quiet older man who rarely spoke, knocked on his door that evening. "Some guys were asking about you," he said. "Government types, showed IDs, said they needed access to the basement, didn't give a reason." Nolan didn't sleep that night. By dawn, he had packed every flash drive, every external disk, every scrap of note into a battered leather suitcase. He slipped out a side entrance and took a cab to the edge of the city, where a night bus headed west, toward the desert. Dr. Trent, before her disappearance, had mentioned a rumoured telemetry backup station, an off-grid location, long since decommissioned, that once served as a failsafe for deep space signals. Some believed it had recorded raw transmissions before edits, before filters. If the faked tapes were the illusion, then maybe this place held the untouched truth. As the bus hummed along the highway, Nolan stared out the window. The desert stretched in the distance, barren and vast. He felt small. What did it mean if the moon landing, the most iconic achievement in modern history, had been falsified in part, or worse, entirely? What did that say about decades of progress, about human ambition, about the stories we cling to? Maybe we did land. Maybe we also faked it just in case. Insurance against failure, theatre for victory. Either way, the truth was no longer safe, in vaults or libraries. It was hunted, buried, erased, and he was running with its last flickering shadow. The puzzle was too vast to piece together all at once, but one thing was painfully clear. The Watchers wanted him quiet, permanently. Nolan closed his eyes, drifting into a shallow, uneasy half-sleep. His body ached, his mind frayed, and in that in-between state, the static in his ears morphed into fragmented whispers. "We told them we were first. The Soviets believed we soared. Project Selene was the key to winning hearts, no matter the cost." His eyes snapped open. He shot upright, breath ragged, heart hammering in his chest. Cold sweat clung to his back. Was he the cost now? Sense of grim inevitability settled over him. He was standing at the edge, on the verge of something buried for decades. Somewhere out there, a hidden station waited, protected, perhaps, by those still desperately trying to preserve the illusion. Somewhere inside, a forgotten archivist's voice still echoed, calling him forward, beckoning him toward the final reel, the one that could destroy the lie that half the world had grown up believing. The Watchers circled like wolves, unseen but ever present. Dr. Eliza Trent was missing, gone without a trace, and that same ghostly voice, the archivist from the 70s, kept whispering in his mind, guiding him. Nolan Price trudged down a dusty, sun-scorched desert highway, the kind that stretched forever without promise. A windless, heat pressed down like a furnace. Ahead, a corroded, barely readable road sign tilted sideways, half swallowed by the sand. The entire scene looked like a forgotten testing site, the kind where NASA once rehearsed for the moon. Or made it look. Like they did, he had no car, no backup, no signal, no map. Just a battered duffel slung over one shoulder, heavy with ancient film reels, hard drives, and a half-broken laptop. The bus had dropped him off miles ago, far behind now. He was following only a rumour. The rumour said a decommissioned NASA communications outpost sat hidden out here, one that might still hold backup transmissions, raw footage, maybe even logs left by the Watchers themselves. If he could find that station, he might finally uncover the truth, or at least what they were so afraid of. But the Watchers weren't far behind. They had satellites, drones, license plate readers, ping triangulation, all the tools of modern surveillance. Nolan had used none of them. He'd gone full ghost, no phone, no cards, off-grid. And yet somehow he still felt them closing in, like shadows on the edge of his vision. Above him, a faint hum broke the silence. He froze. A drone? He scanned the empty sky, squinting through the glare. Nothing. But he knew better than to trust his eyes. Every step felt like infiltration. Every rest a trap. It was dusk on the second day when he finally found it. a chain-link fence, rusted but intact, topped with spirals of barbed wire. Beyond it stood a cluster of squat concrete buildings, low and windowless, like forgotten military, bunkers. A faded sign read, NASA Remote Telemetry, Station 9, and beneath it, in red stencil, abandoned. But as he approached, he heard it, a faint electronic beep. Motion sensors still active. His heart pounded harder now. This place wasn't entirely dead. He pulled wire cutters from his pack, clipped a corner of the fence, and slipped through the gap. The facility's main door groaned under his crowbar, the rusted handle giving way with a sharp snap. Inside, it was tomb silent. The air was stale and heavy with dust. Light barely reached past the cracked doorway. He clicked on a flashlight, sweeping. The beam over the walls. Old NASA consoles lined the room, labeled Apollo, Gemini, Deep Space, TLM. Dead monitors stared back like hollow eyes. He stood there for a moment, overtaken by awe and dread. This was a real telemetry link, a piece of the space age. If illusions were created to keep the dream alive, this place might have been one of the forges. In the back, a metal door caught his attention. Unlike the others, it had new locks. Modern, clean. He swallowed hard. Someone had been here recently. With shaking hands, he forced it open. Beyond lay a small side lab, and unlike the rest of the compound, this one hummed faintly. Cool air brushed his skin from a still-functioning ventilation duct. Sleek computers sat on metal racks, blinking faint blue LEDs. A workstation glowed with a black screen waiting for login. On the desk, a sticky note curled from Age. Archive Selene. Authorized access only. His breath hitched. This was it. He connected his laptop with trembling fingers, booted the terminal. A password prompt appeared. He typed, Selene access denied. Next, Apollo 1969, still nothing. Frustrated, he rifled through drawers, his hands scraping through paper, tools, cables. Then, on the back of a clipboard, he saw scribbled numbers and a phrase, Tranquility Base the 7. He typed it in. The screen flickered, then turned green. He was in folders populated the screen. One caught his eye immediately. Live, Stage, Feed 69, Simulation. Mixer, another, Broadcast cut files. He stared, unblinking. This was proof. At least some of the moon broadcast had been simulated, edited, reassembled for the world. Then he spotted it. Another folder, Archive Trent Comms. He clicked it. A grainy video loaded. The picture was shaky, black and white, but the audio was clear. Dr. Eliza Trent sat in a chair, her hands bound, flanked by two men in dark suits. We can't let them keep lying, she said, eyes wild. People deserve... The video cut out. He slammed his fist on the desk. They got her. She tried to expose this and vanished. Nolan knew he didn't have much time. They'd trace the access. They'd be here soon. But the lab had one last relic. A satellite uplink console, half covered by dust. A relic from the 60s, used to beam signals across oceans and stars. He brushed it off, flipping switches, listening for that telltale hum. It still worked. He grabbed cables, hands moving on instinct, plugging his laptop into the old interface. The generator kicked up louder, a low mechanical growl filling the room. Outside, he heard the creak of the massive satellite dish shifting into position. The console blinked with options. Signal frequencies, civil bands, low Earth, radio, emergency nets. He selected them all. No more edits, no more cuts. He was going to saturate every open frequency with the raw files, the truth, unfiltered, unstoppable. A final broadcast to pierce the illusion before the watchers arrived. The final transmission, he selected the files, raw footage, of the moon landing soundstage, reels showing camera crews, set directors giving cues, and astronauts practicing their moonwalk under overhead rigging. One outtake revealed an actor tripping in simulated low gravity. Someone off camera yelled, "Cut! Start again, Neil." Most damning of all were the audio logs. We never left Earth. We built illusions. He included the fragment of Dr. Trent, the whistleblower astrophysicist, last seen in 1979, her voice shaky as men in suits loomed behind her. We can't let them keep lying. People deserve to... The screen had cut out. But it was enough. Nolan Price tapped transmit. A progress bar appeared. 10%. 20%. Then, boots on concrete outside. The watchers had arrived. They fanned through the abandoned telemetry station like wraiths, their flashlights slicing through dust-laden air. Nolan sprang up, wedging a heavy filing cabinet against the lab door. Gunfire erupted from the hallway, splintering wood and echoing like thunder in the steel-bellied facility. %. He ducked behind the console. Bullets cracked through the flimsy walls. He locked the outer doors with a manual override. It might buy him seconds. Just seconds. The signal pushed on. 80%. A scream of metal. Someone had brought a breaching saw. He fumbled for the flare pistol he'd found in the emergency locker. A signal gun. Barely a weapon. But it was all he had. He fired it. The flare burst in the room with a blinding hiss. The watchers scattered instinctively, some ducking, others cursing. It bought him a breath. Sparks flew. The console shuddered from the return fire. The watchers kicked through the barricade, storming in with military precision. Their leader wore a matte black helmet, the voice modulator in his mask chillingly calm. "Stop the upload. Now. Or you. Die!" Nolan stood, trembling, hands smeared with dust and blood. "It's done. The world will see your lies." The masked man stormed forward, yanking at cables. But Nolan had layered in redundancies. The files were already spooling out through old satellite dishes, bouncing from relay to relay. 5%. They were too late. The watchers, realizing the inevitable, exchanged a look of fury. "Then we'll bury you with it." The shot came swift. Nolan gasped. Pain seared through his chest like fire. He collapsed to the floor, coughing up blood, but his eyes stayed locked on the screen. 100%. The terminal beeped. Transmission complete. The signal soared, unstoppable, across bandwidths, satellite feeds, and unsecured relay points. The watchers turned to flee, smashing consoles in futile rage. Nolan's vision blurred. He felt himself slipping into cold silence, but before the darkness took him, he glimpsed the flickering monitor. Broadcast frequencies, public spectrum accessed. His breath hitched, a faint smile cracking his lips. He had done it. The reel's final words whispered in his memory. "We told them we left Earth, but we never had to." The world reacts by dawn. It was everywhere. Grainy black and white footage filled televisions, Twitter feeds, ephemeral streaming sites, even ham radio broadcasts, dusty sound stages, mocked lunar terrain, astronauts suspended on wires, directors shouting cues, NASA staff giving real-time adjustments to simulate zero-G movement. An unearthed voice log of a high-ranking NASA official crackled across old airwaves. If this leaks, it's over. Project Selene must stay buried. The footage was too complex, too detailed, too real to be dismissed. NASA released emergency statements calling it fabricated, AI-generated misinformation. The White House echoed their claims, but the tide had turned. Major outlets ran exposés. What did we really see in 1969? The moon hoax, proven at last. Dr. Eliza Trent, the silent truth seeker. A decades-old conspiracy theory, long mocked, had detonated in full. Experts scrambled. Could some missions have occurred while others were staged? Did NASA land humans but stage footage to cover failures? Or had it all been performance? No one had answers. But the illusion was broken. Legacy Nolan Price was never found. The telemetry station was burned down in a desert wildfire. The official report listed the building as already condemned. Yet his name would be whispered by millions. A martyr, a truth archivist, a digital Prometheus. And somewhere, buried in that final reel, the voice of the archivist lingered. We soared not with rockets, but with stories, and stories can be weapons. Several former astronauts publicly dismissed the claims as nonsense. But oddly, a few either refused all interviews or had passed away under mysterious circumstances. What started in the shadows of fringe internet conspiracy forums had suddenly become front-page news. Everyone, scientists, journalists, even everyday people, wanted to know the truth. If the famed Martian broadcast had been staged, what else in history had been fabricated? Who was really behind the veil of our reality? Arcadia Aerospace, the obscure company that had hired Nolan Price, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Their PR department issued a bland statement. We believed the footage to be standard NASA archival material. But the damage had been done. Insider leaks suggested Arcadia had deep ties to long-defunct intelligence agencies, Cold War relics still quietly operating under new names. The government tried to contain the firestorm, promising an internal review, but the language was too familiar, too rehearsed. The public wasn't buying it. Protests broke out across NASA facilities. People carried signs that read, "We deserve the truth, no more lies, and bring Nolan's truth to light." Among the protesters were older Americans who had once cried tears of joy watching Neil Armstrong step onto the moon. Now, they stood in silence, clutching signs with trembling hands, their eyes hollow with betrayal. They weren't just angry, they were heartbroken. Had their childhood wonder been scripted? And then Sarah Voss returned. Having gone into hiding after narrowly escaping the Watchers, the secretive group allegedly behind the manipulation, Voss resurfaced with a scathing editorial titled Project Selene, The Greatest Story Never Told. In it, she laid bare her partnership with Nolan Price, detailing how he had uncovered the so-called missing reels, raw, unedited footage that revealed the broadcast's artificial nature. According to her, Nolan had disappeared shortly after releasing the footage to the public. She believed he was dead, possibly silenced by the same people who built the illusion. He died making sure we knew the truth, she wrote. He was a tragic hero, sacrificed at the altar of history. The world reacted with a mix of disbelief, sorrow, and reluctant admiration. Some mourned that Nolan's legacy would forever be tied to the unraveling of a cultural cornerstone. Others praised him as the man who exposed the greatest deception in modern memory. Hashtags surged. Selene Files. Moon Hoax soared. Nolan was right. NASA's official response was predictable. We categorically deny any mission staging. We are investigating the possibility of maliciously altered footage. But cracks started forming within their ranks. Retired engineers and technicians, once silent, began speaking up. One former NASA engineer recalled odd security procedures during the '69 broadcast. There were trucks, he told reporters, broadcast vans with blacked-out windows, no NASA logos, just men in suits watching everything. Even stranger was the confession of an elderly woman in Burbank, a former caretaker at a defunct Hollywood film studio. She remembered a warehouse full of dusty set pieces, grey, cratered landscapes under massive lights. They told me it was for a sci-fi film, she whispered. But the timing, it was all wrong. Suddenly, the absolute certainty of one of humanity's proudest achievements began to crumble. In hidden rooms around the world, the architects of Project Selene, if that was even its true name, watched the chaos unfold. They had spent decades keeping the illusion intact, smothering rumors before they spread. Now, with the truth seeping through every crack, they faced a choice. Attempt one last cover-up, or vanish into the shadows they came from. Some watchers disappeared entirely, leaving behind cryptic trails, anonymous emails, strange symbols carved into subway walls, brief flashes of static on cable news networks. Had they moved on to a new deception, or had they realized the tide was unstoppable? Public opinion fractured. Some clung to hope, believing that even if the original broadcast was staged, humanity had still reached the moon later. They needed a safety net, one scientist said, just in case the real mission failed. But that doesn't mean we didn't go. Others weren't so forgiving. It was all a lie, read a trending post. From start to finish, just Cold War theatre with astronauts as actors. A growing segment of the population dismissed the footage entirely, calling it an elaborate deepfake. The internet buzzed with frame-by-frame breakdowns, voice analyses, and forensic lighting studies. Look at the shadows. One popular video claimed, "They're all wrong." The fallout spread beyond just the moon landing. If that had been staged, what about everything else? What other truths had been replaced by carefully crafted fiction? Meanwhile, Dr. Eliza Trent, freshly recovered after months in hiding, gave a quiet, heavily redacted interview to an independent journal. She confirmed she'd seen technical data logs that discussed broadcast rehearsal sequences. According to her, there had been a real lunar program, but the initial landing had been deemed too risky to reveal live. The staged version was created as a political necessity. "We had to appear stronger than the Soviets," she explained. "The world needed a hero moment, so they built one." But, she admitted, the cost to collective trust, immeasurable. Even, a year later, the shockwaves hadn't settled. New historians penned the Celine deception, arguing that a staged broadcast had overshadowed what might have been a partially successful mission. Hollywood followed suit, producing dramas that blurred fact and fiction. Nolan Price became a polarizing figure. To some, he was the hero who shattered a lie. To others, he was the man who damaged the legacy of a generation. "I believed in NASA," said one tearful scientist in a documentary. "Now, I don't even know what's real anymore." Space agencies around the world scrambled to reassure the public, but exploration funding dipped, recruitment slowed. The stars, once a source of human wonder, had grown dimmer. And in a dusty thrift store in rural Florida, half buried beneath warped VHS tapes and faded Disney clamshells, sat an old, rusted film canister. On the side, in peeling black ink, someone had written, "Celine Launch Rehearsal, 5. A shopper, middle-aged, curious, picked it up, squinting at the NASA imprint stamped into the metal. "Huh," he murmured. "This looks important." He placed it in his basket and kept browsing, unaware he might be holding a piece of history no one ever meant to survive. They bought the canister for $1 at the thrift store, barely giving it a second thought. At home, it ended up on a living room shelf, wedged between a broken lava lamp and a stack of old DVDs. They didn't even open it at first, just one more strange relic in a cluttered space. If they ever got curious enough to play it, though, they'd witness something, never meant for public eyes, a single continuous shot from the moon landing rehearsal. Grainy footage, an astronaut clumsily moving under harsh stage lights, tripping slightly, then pausing. He removed his helmet mid-scene, revealing a sweat-soaked face. "God, it's hot in this suit," he muttered, rubbing his temples. In the corner of the frame, a man in a headset walked into view, pointing and yelling, "Cut! Start again from the hatch!" The tape hissed toward its end. The canister's original label had almost faded completely, save for a ghost-like scrawl that read, "For final illusions, keep locked." Another piece of the truth, misplaced, or waiting for someone else. As for Nolan Price, rumors spread like fog, uncertain and everywhere. A fisherman near the Gulf once claimed he picked up a quiet hitchhiker lugging a duffel bag filled with film reels. Said the man spoke little, but offered him an envelope of cash and a nod of thanks before disappearing into the coastal marsh. A small-time blogger, one who'd defended the leak when no one else would, said she received an unmarked letter. No, return address. Inside was a single sentence. "Thank you for remembering what matters." No one ever confirmed his death. No body, no firm sightings. just whispers. Some say if he did survive, Nolan lived like a ghost, traveling under aliases, avoiding cameras, burdened by a legacy that had already taken everything from him. Project Selene was no longer a buried rumor. It was legend. It was curse. It was real. History books had to rewrite their pages, cautiously. TV specials picked it apart. Think tanks argued about the ethical implications. College students watched the leaked footage in stunned silence, wondering how something so massive could be hidden for so long. And through it all, society felt brittle. Illusions, when embraced, can unify a country, give it hope, a sense of purpose. But when those illusions are exposed, they don't just collapse. They shatter trust at its foundation. People don't know where to turn, what to believe. What else might have been fabricated? Some nights when the world was quiet, you could still hear the echoes of doubt in people's voices. You'd hear it in the tone when they talked about the moon, the pale disk overhead, now forever tinged with uncertainty. Did we walk there, or just pretend to? That question haunted more than it answered. Yet in that haunting, there was also something raw and honest, the endless search for truth, the restless fire in those who won't settle for surface-level stories. And in that way, maybe Nolan's sacrifice wasn't in vain. Maybe the cracks in the official story let in a sliver of something real. Project Selene would remain history's darkest footnote, a whisper at the edge of aspiration, proof that ambition, if divorced from honesty, can birth achievements built on nothing but fog. And maybe, in the background of it all, an old NASA tape still played its last unedited line. We told them it was a great leap for mankind. In truth, it was a single step into the shadows. False Sky's a conspiracy thriller about the government's deepest betrayal and the man who tore the veil. It begins not with a bang, but with silence. 20 years after the worst terrorist attack in modern history, the truth finally claws its way toward the surface. And the man holding the shovel, Thomas Keane, a quiet, guilt-ridden former FBI data analyst who's carried a flash drive like a weight for far too long. He hadn't planned to be a whistleblower, he just couldn't sleep anymore. The file was named Black Dust, a trove of classified memos, encrypted messages, and altered shipping logs, documents that, if real, would confirm what the most paranoid corners of the internet had whispered for years. The attack wasn't just predicted, it was orchestrated, deliberately allowed to happen to spark forever wars and pump billions into the military-industrial machine. On the morning of the leak, the sky hung overcast and heavy, as if it too knew what was coming. Keane sat in a motel just off a dusty stretch of Arizona highway. The wallpaper peeled in the corners. The air smelled like stale cigarettes and old regrets. A second-hand laptop hummed on the nightstand, its screen flickering softly. He double-checked his secure connection, hands trembling, mouth dry. One click, he thought. He hovered over the upload button on an encrypted whistleblower site hosted overseas. For the thousands who died, for the millions misled. He typed a short message. This is what they didn't want you to know. Then he pressed send. The screen blinked. The file was live. Outside the window, trucks rolled by. Somewhere, far from that motel room, powerful men felt their secrets slipping like sand between their fingers. And as Keane leaned back in the creaky chair, he realized something terrifying. There was no going back. This is False Skies, told in 5 parts. A story of power, manipulation, and the cost of unmasking shadows. Settle in. Let the flicker of the screen pull you deeper. The truth, after all, hides in quiet places, and the quiet has begun. Then he pressed send. Within an hour, the file had reached several independent journalists and a major international news outlet known for standing up to government censorship. At the outlet's headquarters, the editorial board huddled over the documents. The air buzzed with a strange mix of excitement and unease. They cross-checked dates, names, metadata. anything they could verify quickly. Some pages looked old, worn, scanned in a rush. Others were crisp, as if someone had recently compiled them. But the language, the tone, it all felt real, too real. By late afternoon, the first article went live. Its headline was bold but cautious. Leaked documents allegedly expose secret. Plan behind 20-year-old attack. It was littered with disclaimers. Unverified. Anonymous source. Possibly fabricated. Still, the contents were explosive. Skeptics online rolled their eyes, calling it yet another basement conspiracy. But others, especially the crowd long labelled as paranoid truthers, treated it like revelation. The smoking gun they'd always claimed existed. Mainstream networks mostly brushed it off. Some called it a glitch. Others whispered about AI-generated forgeries. The official response came quickly. A White House spokesperson dismissed the story as foreign disinformation. But behind closed doors, not everyone was so sure. The leaked file contained typed memos, supposedly from high-level intelligence briefings, dated just months before the attack. They mentioned the need for a catalyzing event to unite public sentiment and justify long-term military action overseas. One memo hinted, disturbingly, at letting something happen, something manageable but galvanizing. There were insurance records too, showing last-minute policy expansions on specific tower floors. Even military documents aligned too perfectly, with timelines, orders to stand down certain training exercises that coincided exactly with the attack window. Thomas Keane watched all this unfold from the dim, flickering TV in his cheap motel room. The anchor's voice trembled slightly as she explained the leak. Officials deny any authenticity, she said. The White House calls the documents malicious propaganda from hostile actors. Keane sighed bitterly. He knew what came. Next, denial, distraction, then the hunt for him. He shut his laptop, slid it into his worn messenger bag and zipped it up tight. Time to disappear. Keane wasn't just some random whistleblower. He'd spent nearly 10 years in the FBI's data analytics wing, sorting through anomalies, odd payments, missing logs, unusual spikes in surveillance requests. Over time, he saw the pattern forming. The same handful of names kept popping up. Defense, contractors, top intelligence officials, CEOs of firms that saw massive profits from the wars that followed. Too many coincidences, too many red flags ignored. Over the years, he quietly copied and archived whatever he could. He told himself he was just being thorough, just in case. But deep down, he knew he was waiting for the day he had the courage to act. That day had come. Elsewhere, inside government buildings shielded by layers of clearance, powerful gears began to turn. At a secure facility outside Langley, a high-level task force convened in a windowless room. Someone had recognized his name. Thomas Keane, said one official, scanning a file. Worked on internal audit reports. Cleared for TSSCI data streams. He had access. The director of a covert intelligence division, Eldridge Shaw, stepped in. A sharp-suited man with a face carved from stone. Shaw believed in one thing above all: control. This can't spread, he said calmly. The public doesn't need the truth. They need stability. Within hours, Keane was classified as a national security threat. An internal bulletin labelled him a suspected cyber saboteur and domestic extremist. Agencies were ordered to comb through his digital history, trace his known contacts, scour surveillance feeds from near the FBI, building the day the files were copied. Shaw personally called media execs at major outlets. His message was blunt: kill the coverage, delay, distract. Compliance came swiftly. Evening broadcasts gave the story mere seconds, if they mentioned it at all, but the internet didn't wait. On social media, the hashtag #BlackDust went viral. Amateur sleuths pored over every document, line by line. Some memos referenced obscure acronyms only used within the intelligence community, too obscure to fake, some experts argued. Others pointed out IP addresses embedded in internal emails that traced back to real, hidden subdomains used by defense systems. Public disbelief turned to unease. If even a fraction of this leak was authentic, it meant someone in the highest ranks not only foresaw the tragedy, but may have helped orchestrate it, a means to an end. The phrase false skies trended overnight, a metaphor for the illusion people had lived under, like a painted dome hiding the real machinery above. By morning, small protests erupted outside federal buildings in New York, D.C., and LA people demanded answers. Transparency. Truth. The government doubled down. Forgery, they insisted. Psychological warfare. But cracks were forming. In darker corners of the web, groups with ties to hacktivist movements issued ultimatums. Release more documents or we will. One message read, "If the truth won't come from above, we'll dig it out from below." Tension spilled into the markets. Stocks for major defense contractors began to tumble. Old rumors about insider trading days before the attack resurfaced. Congressional aides leaked whispers of emergency briefings. Chaos brewed beneath the surface. Keane now hid in an old friend's abandoned cabin deep in the woods. No internet, just a battery-powered radio. He listened to the world unravel through bursts of static and strained voices. He barely ate. He barely slept. Each news report twisted his gut. His name hadn't been mentioned yet, but it was only a matter of time. He imagined his face on posters, the words, "Enemy of the State," in bold print. He stared at the floor, wondering if he'd done the right thing, if telling the truth had any value in a world built on curated lies. He thought about his old desk at the bureau, the files he sifted, the uneasy feeling that never left him. Now the fear was real. Now he was the story. And somewhere far away, behind soundproof doors and encrypted lines, the people he'd exposed were already preparing their next move. The following morning, it was official. The FBI publicly named Thomas Keane as the prime suspect behind what they called a catastrophic breach of national security. They branded him an extremist, a rogue ex-agent with delusions of grandeur. Every major outlet ran the same story. His photo, his credentials, and the carefully curated narrative that painted him as unstable and dangerous. His former colleagues, the people who used to eat lunch beside him and toss him birthday cards signed in office ink, remained silent. But behind closed doors, in quiet corners of agency halls, more than a few of them whispered the same thought. What if it's true? Keane had always been meticulous. Too meticulous, some had said. But no one had ever doubted his eye for patterns, his ability to dig up inconsistencies buried under mountains of data. Far from the headlines, someone else was watching the story unfold, Sarah Voss. Once a respected investigative journalist, Sarah had been blacklisted years ago after she dared question the official 9/11 Commission findings. Editors stopped returning her calls. Networks pulled her documentaries before they aired, but she hadn't stopped chasing the truth. When the black dust documents surfaced, Sarah felt a jolt, half dread, half recognition. She'd seen parts of this story before. Old whispers from retired intel officers, a strange memo someone once slipped her at a bar. It was all here but clearer, more complete. She leaned over her laptop in her cluttered apartment, typed out an encrypted message to the independent site hosting the leak. "I can help verify. Let me speak to the source." That message found its way to Keane through a secure chat relay, passed through digital hands he trusted. He hesitated, then typed a careful reply. It was brief, but it meant everything. "Let's talk." From his dusty hideout, a forgotten cabin tucked into dense forest, Keane initiated the next phase of his plan. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about getting the truth into the hands of someone who could carry it forward if he didn't make it. Sarah Voss might be the only journalist with the guts and background to put it all together. But even now, he wondered, could he trust her? He needed her instincts to outweigh her fear, because exposing the government's darkest deception would come at a price, and those who had profited from 2 decades of war weren't going to give up their lies without a fight. By day 2, the national conversation had become a battleground of disbelief and fury. Official government spokespeople doubled down. The Black Dust Files were a coordinated hoax and foreign disinformation. But smaller outlets, some staffed by former journalists like Sarah, posted side-by-side screenshots comparing the leak with verified CIA and FBI formats. The headers, timestamps, even the internal jargon, it all matched. Too closely to be coincidence. Social media fractured into camps. Some users dissected metadata line by line. Others dismissed it all as a deepfake. Still, the document's implications were seismic. What if 9/11 wasn't just a tragedy of intelligence failure, but something worse, something orchestrated? Public sentiment grew more divided by the hour. Some clung to the comfort of the old story. Others, veterans, victims' families, former agents, felt sick to their stomachs. If this was real, what had they been fighting for? Keane was now listed on every domestic and international watch list. News anchors rattled off his resume. Former FBI data analyst, known for his attention to detail, quietly left the bureau 2 years ago. What they didn't say was why he left, or how, in his final months, he had methodically copied hundreds of documents flagged for deep archival lock. Instead, the press echoed agency lines. Keane had a history of paranoia. He believed in fringe theories. What no one mentioned was that years ago, some of those theories had nearly triggered internal investigations, before senior officials buried the leads. Meanwhile, in a quiet suburb outside Washington, D.C., a black SUV rolled up to a small, unremarkable house. 4 men stepped out, dressed in plain business suits with no agency insignia. Inside, they confronted a middle-aged data engineer, one of Keane's former teammates. Without warrants, without explanation, they demanded access to his home computer. They searched every file, scanned every message for any mention of black dust, Keane, or related keywords. They repeated this in 3 other homes that day, all former FBI employees. No paperwork, no questions, just quiet threats and cold stares. These men weren't ordinary agents. They were part of a covert unit known only to those in the intelligence deep core, a ghost group often whispered about, sometimes called the Watchers. They answered to no department, only to the consolidated intelligence structure formed in the aftermath of 9/11. At the top of that structure sat Director Eldridge Shaw. From a sleek, heavily secured office overlooking a private government courtyard, Shaw managed the crisis with practiced calm. He remembered the morning of the attacks like it was yesterday. The smoke, the fear, the chaos. He remembered how quickly that fear became opportunity. He'd risen fast during those years, championing surveillance expansion and building deep ties with defense contractors. The machinery of post-9/11 power had made him a king in the shadows. Now that machinery was at risk, Shaw stood before his top aides, voice steady. Find Reeve, find Keane, whatever name he's using. We cannot let fantasy destroy 20 years. Of order, his aides nodded. Orders spread. Out in the world, the manhunt accelerated. Checkpoints on highways increased. License plates were scanned in real time and cross-referenced with old databases. Keane adapted. He ditched his rented car, changed clothes, used a false ID from his pre-bureau days. He took back roads, avoided tolls, skipped gas stations with cameras. City centers became death traps. He stayed clear. He knew the system better than most. He'd helped build parts of it. Now, that system was hunting him. He lived off protein bars and cheap snacks, paying only in cash at hole-in-the-wall shops. Each night, he found a low-rate motel, always a different one, checking in under a name borrowed from a long-dead relative. He kept his head down, never stayed more than a night or 2. Every time he pulled into a parking lot, he braced for the screech of tires, expecting black SUVs to appear out of nowhere. The paranoia never let up. It wasn't just fear, It was a heavy, crawling sense that something was about to pounce. Keen's nerves were fraying. Then, finally, Sarah Voss reached out. A secure message popped up on his encrypted chat app. "We need to meet," she wrote. "I can help verify the files. People in the alt media world trust me, at least enough to listen, but we don't have much time. The window's closing." Keen sat frozen for a moment, eyes glued to the screen. He didn't respond right away. An in-person meeting could be traced. A phone ping, a security camera, a passing car, anything. But if they didn't take the risk, the files might vanish into the noise. Another internet rumor buried beneath conspiracy junk. No traction, no accountability, he typed back. They set a time, a place, a small coastal town, off-season quiet. The meeting would be at the local library, after hours. The next evening, as dusk settled over the town, Keen walked toward the library's entrance, hands in his jacket pockets, heart pounding like a war drum. A silver sedan sat idling in the lot. No plates, no movement. Just sitting. There, he veered off casually, circled the block. When he passed by again, the sedan hadn't budged. Maybe nothing. Maybe just someone waiting for a ride. But maybe not. Taking a deep breath, he entered the library. The air inside smelled of old paper and mildew. He spotted Sarah immediately. Tall, early 40s maybe, with sharp eyes and a worn leather jacket. She stood near the back stacks, nodded at him like they were two friends meeting after years. "You're Thomas," she said quietly, offering her hand. He shook it. Her grip was firm. Her voice was calm, but there was urgency beneath it. "I believe you. I've always thought the official story didn't add up. Let's finish this. Let's make it undeniable." Keen exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. He reached into his coat and slid a small USB drive across the table. "This is the full set. More than what I posted before. It includes internal memos, stand-down orders, deals with defense contractors, changes in flight paths. There are emails too, calling the hijackers assets gone rogue." His voice broke slightly. He blinked fast, forcing back the tears. They knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. They used the tragedy to launch wars that would never end. Sarah. They let it happen. Or worse, they made it happen. Sarah's eyes widened as she opened her laptop and scanned through the folders. Her mouth tightened as she saw bank transfers, code names, mentions of Operation Silence. "This is big," she whispered. "Too big for just my blog. If we drop it there, they'll suppress it, mark it as fake, call it AI generated, or label us domestic threats." She paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "We need a bigger platform. Either we find someone inside the mainstream media with guts, or we go live somewhere public, somewhere with enough attention that they can't just erase it." Before Keen could respond, a sudden noise at the front door made them both jump. Muffled footsteps. A dark figure stood outside, peering through the glass. Keen stiffened. Sarah snapped her laptop shut. They crouched behind a nearby bookshelf, hearts thudding. Footsteps echoed softly, coming closer. Then a creaky door opened and closed. An old man with a janitor's keyring shuffled into view, humming to himself. The caretaker, oblivious. Outside, the figure glanced in once more, then disappeared into the night. Could have been nothing. Could have been everything. They didn't wait to find out. They packed up fast, agreed to meet again in 48 hours near a larger city. The plan was risky. Infiltrate a local news station that still allowed independent broadcasts, at least for now. As Keen stepped back into the night, the air felt colder. Sharper. Back at his motel, his burner phone buzzed. A message lit up from Jared, a friend who'd once helped him decipher old flight control logs. "One of our guys is dead. Boat accident. It's starting. They're picking us off." The message ended there. Nothing after. No response when Keen called back. Just silence. He sat there for a long time, phone still in hand. They were cleaning house. erasing anyone who could confirm the leaks. The window was closing fast. Across the country, protests were swelling. Rumors were flying, claims of foreknowledge, whispers of manufactured chaos. Some people were furious, calling it a disgrace to the victims. Others demanded the truth no matter how painful. Truth above all. In Washington, the government doubled down. Director Shaw stood in front of a press podium, eyes cold as stone. We are aware of coordinated attempts to spread dangerous conspiracies. Let me be clear. Domestic agitators pushing false narratives will be held accountable. Justice will be swift. Behind her, the American flag barely moved in the breeze. And then, another discovery. Buried deep within the files, Sarah found references to something even more explosive. The Saturn files. It was vague, fragmented. But the implication was staggering. A classified intelligence ledger tracking financial flows in the aftermath of the attacks. From black budgets to private pockets. From defense funds to shadow entities, it mapped the money. If they could find that ledger, they could follow the trail, straight to the architects of endless war. The game had changed. Again. That might have been the final nail in the coffin of the official story. The Saturn files. If they got to it in time, the whole thing could blow wide open. But the clock was ticking, and now the manhunt had taken center stage. Helicopters hovered above key routes. Unmarked cars loitered near highway rest stops. Police set up random checkpoints under the guise of national security. People were getting nervous. Something felt off, even to those who didn't know the full picture. Keane could sense it too. The government wasn't just reacting, they were scared. Scared that the leak might be real. So he kept moving, changing motels, changing clothes, swapping hats and IDs. At times he even altered his gait, his posture, trying not to look like himself. But he knew he was running out of tricks. Eventually, the odds would turn against him. Sooner or later, he'd have to stop running and gamble everything, trusting that if the truth got out, the storm of public outrage would be loud enough to protect him. It was all or nothing now. What he didn't know was that the Watchers had decided to end it. No more surveillance, no more waiting. A Black Ops unit had been greenlit. Their orders were final. Shut down the leak permanently, by whatever means. If Keane couldn't stay one step ahead, long enough to deliver the final evidence, then the illusion would hold. The lie would remain law. But if he could break it, the entire post-attack order might collapse. The week that followed became a blur. Thomas evading Watchers by day, teaming with Sarah by night. Each meeting grew more desperate, more intense. They'd hole up in borrowed safe houses, some no more than dusty basements or shacks in the woods, always by lamplight, always whispering, as if the walls could hear them. Together, they pieced through decrypted fragments, old CIA memos, obscure budget requests, cryptic references that didn't make sense until seen in context. The Saturn files weren't just rumor anymore. They were real. According to the memos, the Saturn files were an encrypted archive, a digital ledger. It tracked where the money really went in the weeks following the attack. Funds funneled into defense contractors, energy giants, and hand-picked political campaigns. If the documents were real, they revealed the true motive behind everything: war as a business, profit as policy, power consolidated through permanent fear. At one safe house, a crumbling cabin in the desert, Sarah leaned over the table pointing at a highlighted string of metadata. "Here," she said, tapping the screen, "a backup node. It mentions an offline storage vault, decommissioned NSA facility miles outside Albuquerque. Used to be a signal intercept site, but it got mothballed a decade ago." She looked up. Her voice was low but steady. "We get inside, pull the raw archive. We'll have the smoking gun." Keane swallowed hard. Infiltrating a federal site, even one supposedly abandoned, was suicide without a team. They had, what? A dented Corolla, a few burner phones, old laptops. maybe $3,000 in cash between them. The watchers, meanwhile, had drones, biometric scanners, satellite imaging, and agents in every airport, every city grid. But maybe, just maybe, the government assumed no one would be crazy enough to hit an offline site in the desert. Maybe they'd let their guard down. "We go at night," Keane said. "Full blackout gear, no electronics we don't absolutely need. No phones, no signals," Sarah nodded. "We'll need to scout the place first. Look for ingress points. You, sure about this?" "No, but I'm done running." Meanwhile, Director Shaw was tightening the noose. Her face appeared on every screen, calm and cold. A former intelligence analyst, now radicalized, has begun distributing counterfeit documents intended to destabilize the public and undermine national security. These lies are foreign forged. Anyone aiding him is committing treason. Most of the public believed it, but a growing segment wasn't so sure, especially after the accidents. A known whistleblower died in a mysterious fire. Another was found shot in his home. The press called it a robbery gone wrong. They failed to mention his encrypted servers had been wiped. People started asking the obvious question: if it's all fake, why is the government killing to cover it up? Online, the hashtag #ShajaBlackDust surged. Code for the trail of strange deaths. Surrounding the leak, across college campuses and city squares, protests erupted. Placards read, "Tell the truth or stop the murders," and "Whistleblowers, not terrorists." The government clamped down harder. Protesters were arrested en masse. News anchors parroted official lines. Meanwhile, back channels leaked rumors of a coming crackdown. Keane felt the pressure mounting daily. But now, with the Saturn files within reach, he couldn't stop. "This is it," he told Sarah as they mapped the route to the NSA facility. "If the files are legit, we'll see exact dollar transfers from oil boardrooms to senators' super PACs, war budgets greenlit days after. The attack, after these accounts got filled." Sarah stared at the screen. "It's treason," she murmured. Cold, calculated treason. And it worked. They hit the road, avoiding interstates, skirting traffic cams. They used cash for gas and food, burned every receipt. Their IDs were fakes, sloppy ones, but passable. Each night they stayed in a different place, no patterns. Billboards with Keane's face were everywhere now. News tickers called him a domestic threat, a traitor. A reward of $500,000 was offered for information leading to his arrest. He kept his baseball cap low, grew out his stubble. Tinted glasses helped, but barely. He was always looking over his shoulder. Then came the near miss. Driving through a desolate stretch of desert highway, silence all around, Sarah spotted it first. "Tom," he glanced in the rear view. A black SUV had pulled onto the road behind. Them, about half a mile back. No lights, no plates, just following. "Don't speed," Sarah said quietly. "Just stay calm." Keane's hands tightened on the wheel. "I've seen that same model twice before. Same matte finish, same low hum. I think it's one of theirs." The SUV inched closer. The desert around them was endless. No exits, no towns. Just a long stretch of nothing. "We need to lose them," Keane muttered. Sarah glanced at the GPS. There's a dirt road in 2 miles, barely marked. It cuts through an abandoned mining site. If they're not local, they won't know. Keane nodded, jaw clenched. The next few minutes might decide everything. They had seen this pattern before. Black SUVs, no plates, tailing too close. "Hang on," Sarah muttered, white-knuckling the wheel. She yanked the car off the main road, tires screeching as they bounced onto a narrow farm path lined with broken fencing and overgrown grass. Keane glanced behind them. They're following. Then, crack, crack, gunshots. The rear window shattered. Another shot blew out a tire. The car spun out, fishtailing before it slammed into a shallow ditch. Dirt and dust billowed up. They didn't wait. Doors flung open. They scrambled out and ducked into the towering cornfields nearby, hearts hammering, lungs burning. For minutes that felt like hours, they crouched low, barely breathing, listening to the crunch of boots in the distance and the sharp rustle of stalks. Flashlights danced just out of sight. Then, silence. The footsteps retreated. "Guess they don't want a public scene," Keem whispered, trying to calm his shaking hands. Sarah leaned against a cornstalk, catching her breath. "We're onto something real, Keem. They wouldn't try to kill us if we weren't." Days later, after dodging back roads and switching vehicles twice, they reached the outskirts of the old NSA facility. It lay in a dead zone of the map. No signals, no signs of life, just decay. The place looked like a ghost's memory. Rusted chain-link fencing half collapsed, warning signs barely legible, bent poles clawing at the sky. The parking lot was cracked like old skin, weeds pushing through the asphalt. Twilight made the scene feel even more surreal, the dying sun throwing long shadows across the deserted compound. Sarah pointed to one corner. There, fences cut. They slipped through the hole, careful not to catch their bags on the twisted metal. The main building loomed ahead, a dark block of concrete and silence. Most windows were boarded. A few vents hung open, and from one, a faint metallic whistling echoed. Somewhere nearby, a coyote howled. The wind felt cold and oily. Inside, it smelled like mildew and metal. Their flashlights illuminated the chaos. Toppled filing cabinets, dusty cubicles, papers curled and yellowed on desks. "Looks like they left in a hurry," Keem whispered. They pressed deeper into the facility, descending metal stairwells until they found what they were looking for. A sub-basement, packed with racks of outdated servers and hardware, most long dead. But not all. A few machines still blinked faintly, running on emergency power. "That's weird," Keem said. "Power should have been cut ages ago." Sarah frowned. "Means someone's still using this place." They found a thick steel door, marked Server Vault Archive 6, locked, of course. Sarah pulled out her phone, fingers tapping rapidly. "I pulled some code fragments from those files we copied. Might generate a bypass sequence." The old interface flickered to life. A dozen attempts, 2 timeouts, then finally, green light. A metallic click. The door swung open. Inside, the room was cold. A thin hum filled the air. Shelves stretched to the ceiling, lined with dusty hard drives, tapes, and labeled reels. Keem scanned tags. Operation Cast Peak, post-quar roster. Wait, here, Saturn. In the back, nestled between bulkier equipment, sat a battered cluster of servers with a fading label. Saturn FSV. They set up a portable terminal and plugged in. Sarah typed a root command. The screen flared to life. Restricted. Saturn. 2-3 enter. Password. They tried every keyword they'd pulled from the stolen documents. After 3 tries, a soft beep. Access granted. Lines of data spilled down the screen. Financial authorizations for obscene amounts. Blueprints for building demolitions. Insider trades timed exactly around a major national tragedy. Keem read aloud, stunned. These are officials, bank execs, even media people. Sarah swallowed hard, her face pale in the glow of the screen. They planned the whole thing, used the attack to scare the country into handing over everything. The war budgets, the surveillance laws, everything. Another line made her voice catch. Some of the hijackers were known assets. Handlers even called it a controlled ignition. They stared at each other. The room felt smaller now. Then, footsteps. Upstairs. Slow. Measured. "They're here," Keem said, already launching a data transfer. External drives began filling, progress bars crawling across his screen. Sarah started cutting lights. "I'll buy you time!" Boots thundered down the stairwell. Flashlights sliced through the darkness. Gunfire erupted. Sparks burst from a server rack as bullets slammed into it. Sarah ducked behind a console, pulling a compact pistol from her jacket. She fired twice, forcing the intruders back. Keem worked furiously, linking the server to a portable satellite router. The connection was weak but alive. He triggered a remote upload. 10%, he muttered, teeth clenched. A voice bellowed. From the hallway! Stop! They froze. A tall figure stepped into view. Grey suit, sharp eyes, familiar face. Director Shaw. You don't know what you're doing, Keem, Shaw said, stepping closer. You'll collapse entire alliances. You'll spark wars. That day was complex. You think you've uncovered truth, but it's a loaded gun pointed at the world. Keem didn't respond. The upload was crawling past 50%. Shaw snapped. Flash it. One of the watchers lobbed a flashbang into the vault. Boom! A wall of sound hit them like a wave. White light, ringing ears, dizziness. They staggered, disoriented. The watchers surged forward. Sarah tried to fire again but was tackled. Her gun skidded across the floor. Keem was slammed against the wall. A boot came down on the laptop. Crack! The screen shattered. No! He shouted. Upload frozen, 80%. Keem twisted, adrenaline surging, and smashed the corner of the broken laptop into his attacker's face. The man reeled. Sparks from the laptop flickered. Then, miraculously, the screen blinked back on. The upload resumed. Another watcher tried to rip the cables from the server. In the chaos, someone's shot clipped a coolant pipe. Pressurized steam hissed through the vault, filling it with thick fog. Shaw backed out, coughing. We're pulling out! The remaining watchers hesitated, unsure, but their radios screamed retreat. Inside, Keem dragged Sarah to her feet, her shoulder bleeding, but her eyes burning with defiance. The upload bar hit 100%, files secured, but they both knew it wasn't over, not even close. Flames crawled along the ceiling, licking metal beams as smoke thickened around them. The heat warped the air. Shaw stepped through the haze, his silhouette framed in firelight. His pistol aimed squarely at Keem's chest. You can die with your fantasies, Shaw said coldly, or disappear quietly. Either way, the truth dies. With you. Keem's vision swam, ears still ringing from the last blast. His fingers hovered over the laptop, the upload bar agonizingly frozen at 98%. He looked up, bloody and breathless, meeting Shaw's eyes. You're wrong, Keem rasped. It's already out. Another loud boom shook the sub-basement. The ruptured coolant line triggered a short circuit. Sparks rained from the ceiling. One of the main power junctions exploded, igniting exposed cables. Fire surged outward. Chaos erupted. The watchers shouted, retreating as flames engulfed the corner of the room. One tried to grab the laptop. Another lunged for Sarah, but she crawled away through the smoke, dragging herself toward the exit. Keem, with the last ounce of strength, slammed a final keystroke. Beep. Upload complete. Somewhere, far from this place, the Saturn files were already propagating. Their backup server, a cluster of anonymous nodes on the open web, received the package. Shaw's expression changed from cold confidence to pure rage. Stop him, he roared. A gunshot cracked through the firestorm. Keem staggered back. Blood bloomed across his chest. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. The laptop clattered to the floor, screen still glowing faintly. One of the watchers tried to yank the cables, but it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. Alarms screamed. A second explosion rocked the floor, sending a wall crashing down. The infrastructure was failing. The sub-basement, already compromised, began to collapse under the pressure of fire and failing systems. A concussive blast from behind launched Sarah through the air. She hit a wall hard, skidding along the floor, into unconsciousness. The watchers pulled back, dragging Shaw with them, coughing and shouting through radios. Steel and concrete gave way. The entire chamber caved in. Keem's body disappeared beneath a roar of rubble, flames, and dust. They thought they'd won. But it was too late. Within hours, the Saturn files exploded across the internet. It began on obscure activist forums, mirrored instantly by whistleblower networks and archived by digital freedom groups. By morning, major social platforms were flooded with files, screenshots, decrypted logs, scanned documents. Governments scrambled, agencies issued takedown requests and blanket denials, but the data kept reappearing, mirrored, copied, disseminated. People were reading internal documents marked Operation White Door, Project Switchboard, a classified commission to manipulate media narratives, direct communication between intelligence heads and extremist operatives, discussion threads where high-ranking officials calculated acceptable civilian losses to justify new war budgets. The scope was monstrous. The documents revealed that parts of the attacks were not only foreseen, but quietly allowed, weaponized for maximum public fear. Public trust snapped. Protests broke out within 24 hours. Washington, D.C., New York, London, Berlin, Tokyo. Angry crowds flooded the streets, demanding resignations, justice, answers. Several Allied governments demanded immediate clarification from Washington. Rival nations called for an emergency UN Council. Inside the US, rallies surrounded Capitol Hill. Government buildings were barricaded. Police clashed with protesters. States of emergency were declared, some ignored by governors outright. Corporate executives from major defense contractors were named directly in documents. Lawsuits began within days. Board members resigned. Some fled the country. The stock market buckled. Defense stocks cratered. News anchors who once repeated the official story were now issuing on-air apologies, or doubling down in defiance, spinning patriotic rhetoric that only fueled more anger. Major newspapers tried to contain the damage, but couldn't keep pace. Independent, journalists verified metadata, timestamps, and signatures. Anonymous cybersecurity experts proved the files were decades old and unaltered. Even some mid-level intelligence officers began to speak out. "I was there," one anonymous whistleblower admitted on a live stream. "I saw them coordinate this." The spiral accelerated. Families of the original attack victims demanded accountability. Former generals appeared on news channels with partial confessions or distancing statements. One leaked email from a sitting senator coldly read, "It had to happen to pass the Patriot Expansion Act. Nobody had the stomach for it otherwise." The nation was in shock. Director Shaw tried to contain the fallout. He stepped onto a podium outside DHS headquarters, flanked by armed guards, facing a sea of reporters and protesters. "I want to make this clear," he said into the microphone, sweat on his brow. "These documents are forged, fabricated to destabilize us." The crowd erupted in boos. Bottles were thrown, microphones cut out. "No more lies," someone screamed. "Arrest Shaw." The scene devolved. Within hours, Congress members, under public pressure, called for emergency hearings. Internal investigations began. Several arrests followed. Shaw, in a last desperate move, pushed for martial law, citing national security. The White House issued an emergency declaration. It only made things worse. Governors in several states refused federal orders. Military leaders hesitated. Civil unrest boiled over. Over the next weeks, power structures fractured. Coalitions once unified by fear and secrecy now faced criminal charges. Lawmakers uncovered more, rigged no-bid contracts, staged intelligence briefings, manipulated terror alerts. The apparatus of post-attack governance, built on trust, trauma, and silence, crumbled, and through it all, a single truth echoed louder than any gunshot, any speech. The Saturn files were real, and now the world knew. Sarah Voss emerged from the inferno of the Southwestern fiasco, battered, burned, but alive. Her first dispatch shook the world. In one man's last key press, a column that would go viral within hours, she wrote of how the Watchers had embedded themselves inside a decommissioned NSA site, how they hunted for a man with truth in his hands, and how Thomas Keane, in a swirl of gunfire and collapsing steel, drove one final keystroke to set the Saturn files free. The piece moved millions. In her words, Keane became not just a whistleblower, but a symbol of sacrifice, of clarity in darkness, of rebellion against silence. His death, though unconfirmed, was accepted as fact, but his legacy had already transcended the question of survival. At the grassroots level, a tidal wave of reckoning surged. Families of 9/11 victims called for new trials, rejecting the long-held official narrative. Entire commissions were discredited. Sealed records, now mirrored online, showed disturbing contradictions. Timelines that didn't match, testimonies buried, evidence ignored. Some of the original investigators came forward, admitting they had been misled or threatened into submission. The emotional toll reignited. It was as though the country had been forced to relive its deepest wound, this time without the anesthesia of belief. How did fear become so profitable? Sarah asked in a follow-up piece. And how did so many good people let it happen? Internationally, the fallout was seismic. Nations that had built foreign policies around the war on terror felt betrayed. Some withdrew troops from active deployments. Others launched their own parliamentary inquiries, suspecting they too had been complicit in a grand illusion. The world order forged in the wake of that tragic day began to fracture. For some, it meant hope, the possibility of a less militarized world. For others, it signaled danger, a vacuum extremists might exploit, and then came the rumors that Thomas Keane might still be alive. Grainy sightings in remote towns, a figure matching his description spotted in ferry ports and border zones. Government statements maintained he was presumed dead. But those who knew him believed something else. That maybe, having done what he set out to do, he had chosen a life of anonymity. That maybe he was out there, watching a world he'd changed. 6 months after the Saturn files meltdown, the reckoning arrived in full. The Senate convened an unprecedented hearing. It stretched for weeks. Public interest was intense. Broadcasts ran 24/7. Former generals, defense contractors, retired administration figures, some from 2 decades prior, were hauled in and sworn under oath. Some pleaded the Fifth, others cited national security. A few broke. Indictments followed. Not all led to convictions. The system was too vast, too shielded by decades of legal scaffolding. But the symbolic weight was massive. Never again would the official version of events go unchallenged. Sarah Voss, once a sideline journalist, now stood at the center of a media renaissance. She launched False Skies, a crowdsourced independent platform that chronicled government cover-ups, dark programs, and public testimonies. Freed from blacklists and gatekeeping, she became a beacon of accountability. People from all walks of life contributed. Technicians, translators, security guards, widows, analysts, each with a piece of the buried puzzle. Together, they rebuilt the truth. A year later, near Ground Zero, a new memorial rose. It wasn't grand or towering, just a life-sized bronze statue of a man pressing a single key. The inscription read, "They took truth from us in the shadows. He brought it back in the light." Visitors came in silence. Some left flowers, others just wept. They had no illusions that the war was over, but they had something they hadn't had in decades. Clarity. One last whisper. In a quiet coastal town, far from the cameras and memorials, a fisherman swore he recognized a face from a circulated photo. Older now, weathered by salt, sun, and sorrow. They shared a beer at dawn. The man said he used to work for the government before the sky broke. He spoke of illusions, of the high cost of unmasking what the world wasn't ready to see. He handed the fisherman a battered flash drive and vanished with the tide. The fisherman never found his name, but he never forgot the look in his eyes. Today, public trust in large institutions remains fragile. Some are still furious, others cautiously hopeful that transparency might finally become standard, not exception. In the deep corners of the internet, conspiracy watchers wonder if the watchers still operate, planning new myths, new ghosts. But one truth is undeniable. The greatest deception in modern history was dragged into the light, and no force, no agency, no gun could stop it. In archives and alleyways, in classrooms and courtrooms, a name is whispered. Black dust, a code word, a warning, a memorial, a reminder that fear once shaped the world, but that one day fear lost, and the truth, raw, burning, undeniable, soared free. In the distance, a final note lingers. Washington City smelled of gunpowder and champagne in April of 1865. And now again, of ash, silence, and revolution. Truth burns. But it also cleanses. The air in Washington was thick, not just with the muddy scent of spring after rain, but with tension that clung to the skin like smoke. Though the war had officially ended, the streets crackled with a strange energy, a mix of exhausted celebration and something darker. Suspicion, grief, fear of what came next. Elias Finch felt all of it in his bones as he walked briskly down F Street, boots splashing through shallow puddles left behind by the afternoon storm. He kept his coat pulled tight against the chill, his well-worn notebook pressed against his ribs inside the inner pocket. At 36, Elias had the look of a man carved by war. Sharp cheekbones, a furrowed brow, eyes that studied everything and trusted nothing. 4 years of covering a war where brother killed. Brother had stripped away any illusions he'd once had about glory or honor. He'd learned something far colder. That truth is the first casualty of war, and peace often does worse, quietly burying the corpse. His boarding house was a narrow 3-story building, tucked between a shuttered grocer and a bakery still flickering with lamplight. Nothing about it stood out. That was the point. Elias paid for anonymity the way others paid for whiskey. In his work, silence and invisibility were priceless. As the publisher of The Honest Witness, an underground pamphlet that had fearlessly exposed war profiteers, black market dealings, and political betrayals, Elias had gained a loyal, secretive readership. He'd also earned a long list of enemies. Senators, colonels, wealthy merchants. They all hated him. But his readers passed each issue hand to hand, trusting Elias's ink more than the official word of any newspaper. The war may be ending, he muttered to himself, climbing the crooked staircase to his second-floor room. But the real fighting is just beginning. The hallway creaked beneath his feet. The door to his room stuck slightly as always, but he gave it a firm shove and stepped inside. The space was small, walls stained yellow from years of pipe smoke and lamp oil. Sheets of paper covered the desk, the bed, even the floor in spots. Notes, letters from sources, government memos, newspaper clippings. A small hand press crouched in the corner like a black iron beast, its handle worn from nightly use. He closed the door, turned the bolt, and lit the oil lamp on his desk. The light flickered to life, casting long shadows across the cluttered room. From beneath a loose floorboard, he pulled his latest draft. The headlines stared back at him, serpents in the cabinet. Lincoln surrounded by traitors. Even by his standards, it was bold. He was about to begin editing when a knock startled him. 3 sharp taps, a pause, then 2 more. He froze. That was the signal. Elias crossed the room and pressed his ear to the door. Nothing. Slowly, he unlatched the bolt and opened it just wide enough to peer through. "Colonel Simmons," he whispered. The figure in the hallway stepped into the light. Colonel James Simmons looked worse than usual. His Union blues were wrinkled, streaked with mud, and his face drawn with exhaustion. He removed his cap, revealing hair that had turned almost completely grey since Elias had last seen him. "You shouldn't be here," Elias hissed, opening the door fully and pulling him inside. "We were supposed to meet at Harper's Ferry. Tomorrow." Simmons stepped in with a shaky nod, his eyes darting to the shadows behind him, before Elias shut and re-bolted the door. "Tomorrow might be too late," the colonel said, his voice dry and cracking. "Something's happening, Finch. Something big. Elias narrowed his eyes. Another supply scandal. Or is it more ghost regiments that don't exist on paper? Simmons shook his head slowly. No, this isn't about money. Elias poured him a shot of whiskey without asking. The colonel took the glass in both hands, gulped it down in one go, and winced. It's about power, he said, the words sticking in his throat. Someone plans to hold on to it, tight, now that the fighting's stopped. Elias leaned against the desk. That could be half the city. You're going to need to be more specific. Simmons set the empty glass down with a quiet clink, then rubbed his temples with trembling fingers. Lincoln's making enemies faster than he can keep track of. The South still wants his head. Half his generals think he's a coward. And the radicals in his own party, they hate him worse than the Confederates ever did. That's not exactly news, Elias replied. Though he said it slowly, Simmons looked scared. Not cautious, not careful. Scared. It's worse than you think, Simmons said, lowering his voice. There have been meetings, secret ones, people with real pull, military brass, cabinet members, bankers, old families, people who don't like the direction this country's headed. What kind of meetings? Simmons met Elias's eyes. The kind where no one takes notes, the kind where doors are locked from the inside and guards posted outside, the kind where one man doesn't come out the same as he went in. The room suddenly felt colder, like the draft had found its way through the walls. Elias stared at the colonel. You're saying they're plotting something? Against Lincoln? I'm saying, Simmons said carefully, that there's talk about restoring balance, about a clean transition, words they use when they don't want to say what they really mean. Elias walked over to the press and leaned on it, trying to make sense of the pieces. Do you have names? Simmons hesitated. Some. But if I say them out loud, it could cost both of us more than a story. Why come to me now? Elias asked. Because I think it's already started, Simmons said grimly. And because you're the only one who's never lied about what he sees. They speak of a necessary transition, of securing the victory. Elias leaned in, his voice urgent. Names, Colonel. I need names. Simmons shook his head, frustration etched into the lines of his face. That's just it. I don't have them all, but I've seen insignias, strange ones, not official military, a bird rising from flames, a phoenix. His eyes flicked nervously toward the window. And Stanton, he added, lowering his voice further. He's at the center of it somehow. Elias blinked. Edwin Stanton, Lincoln's own Secretary of War. Simmons nodded, jaw tight. Elias grabbed his pen and began scribbling in his notebook, every letter a scratch in the silence between them. Watch the Treasury building, Simmons said, standing. Tomorrow night, back entrance, midnight. You'll see for yourself who comes and goes. He moved toward the door, stopping with his hand on the knob. Be careful who you trust. Finch, he warned, voice barely above a whisper. The war may be ending, but it created new alliances, not all of them visible. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Alone, Elias couldn't sit still. He paced his cramped room like a caged animal, boots thudding softly against the floorboards. He replayed the conversation again and again. Stanton, stoic, relentless Stanton, at the center of a secret network. It didn't fit. And yet, the fear in Simmons' eyes was real. That kind of fear couldn't be faked. As dusk deepened into night, Elias pulled on his coat and slipped into the streets. Washington after sundown felt like a different place. In May, the dark, it whispered, rather than shouted. The gaslights along the avenues flickered against the fog rolling in from the river. Behind closed shutters, people laughed, argued, mourned, toasted. Grief and joy existed side by side in every home. Near Lafayette Square, something caught Elias's eye. 4 black carriages rolling in perfect formation, silent but deliberate, like predators moving through tall grass. Their windows were covered by thick curtains, and none bore any official government seal. He melted into the shadows and watched. As the first carriage passed under the lamplight, a glint of something metallic flashed on the door, a tiny emblem, almost invisible, a bird with wings spread wide rising from flames. The phoenix. Elias's breath caught. He followed the carriages at a distance, keeping to alleys and side streets, heart pounding in his ears. The convoy turned and disappeared behind the White House gates, slipping through a lesser-used side entrance. Then, a figure emerged briefly to greet them. Tall, bearded, the shape of his profile was unmistakable. "Stanton," Elias whispered, noting the time. 11:17. He didn't sleep that night. The next day, the city exploded with news. General Robert E. Lee had formally surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. The war was over. The streets filled with singing and cheering. People wept, openly. Flags were raised, champagne flowed, strangers embraced like long-lost family. And yet, beneath the joy, Elias felt something else moving, something quieter, colder. Beneath the surface of the celebration, power was shifting. That night, he was exactly where Simmons had told him to be, by the back entrance of the Treasury building, pressed into a narrow alley, collar turned high against the spring chill. At midnight, they arrived, not in government carriages, but private ones, elegant, old, well-maintained. The kind with secrets in their upholstery, curtains drawn. No sound but the creak of wheels and the soft snort of horses. The doors opened swiftly. One by one, men stepped out, silent, focused. They moved like men used to making decisions that shaped nations. Faces were hidden in shadow, but Elias recognized some anyway. A Supreme Court justice, 2 generals, and, if his eyes weren't playing tricks, Vice President Andrew Johnson himself. Then came the final carriage. Smaller, darker. When its occupant stepped out, Elias felt a chill ripple down his spine. Senator Lafayette Baker, head of the National Detective Police, Lincoln's personal spy master. Even in the dim gaslight, Baker was unmistakable. He paused at the door, turning slowly, as if sensing something just beyond his vision. Elias didn't breathe. Then Baker turned again and stepped through the door. On his lapel, catching the faint light, was a pin, a phoenix rising from fire. Elias remained hidden in the shadows, frozen, for 3 long hours. No one came in or out. His fingers grew numb. He fought the cold and the gnawing sense that history was curving in on itself, ready to snap. At last, the door opened. The men emerged slowly, silently, like participants in some ritual neither acknowledged nor recorded. Their faces were hard, their eyes empty. Something had happened inside that building, something that would never be spoken of. Back in his room, Elias lit the lamp with shaking hands. He began writing, connecting what he'd seen with what he suspected. His thoughts spun like the gears of his printing press. He drew the insignia carefully. The phoenix, detailed and sharp. Beneath it, he wrote, "The Order of the Phoenix. Secret, society, or military faction." As the pale morning light crept through his window, Elias heard the newsboys outside, shouting with fresh excitement. "Victory complete! President Lincoln to attend Ford's Theatre tomorrow night." The words echoed, in Elias's mind like a gunshot. He sat still, the pencil dangling from his fingers. Simmons's warning returned to him, word for word. Something big is about to happen. He looked back at his notes. The midnight meeting, the Phoenix emblem, Stanton's involvement, Baker's presence, and now, Lincoln in public, tomorrow. Terrible suspicion began to form, something dark and heavy that settled into his chest like a stone. He didn't dare write it down, couldn't. But in that moment, Elias Finch knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone. They weren't just talking about transition. They were preparing for it. He had to be at Ford's Theatre tomorrow night, no question about it. April, 14th broke clear and bright, the kind of spring morning that felt like a promise. It was Good Friday, and the city carried an air of cautious hope, as if the war's long shadow was finally lifting. Flags fluttered from windows and rooftops along Pennsylvania Avenue. Church bells rang, not the mournful tolls of the past 4 years, but jubilant chimes echoing like a chorus of relief. Aya spent the morning moving through the city's underbelly, the parts the politicians liked to pretend didn't exist. He passed from dimly lit taverns to cluttered print shops, always speaking low, always listening closely. He asked about the Order of the Phoenix. The responses weren't loud, but they were clear. Blank stares, sudden silences, nervous shifts in posture. No one said a word about it, but that silence said more than words ever could. By late afternoon, he'd managed to get his hands on a ticket to Ford's Theatre. Our American cousin wouldn't have been his first choice, or even his 10th, but Lincoln was going to be there. And if what Aya feared was true, he couldn't afford to miss it. As the light outside faded into amber and rose, Elias prepared for the evening with unusual care. Gone was the rumpled, ink-stained journalist's uniform he normally wore. Tonight, he dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, with a modest cravat that gave just enough polish without drawing attention. He slipped his leather-bound notebook into his inner jacket pocket, right next to a small revolver. He paused for a moment, fingers resting on the cold metal. He'd never brought a weapon before, but tonight, something felt off. He didn't know what, just that he'd rather be cautious. Then caught flat-footed, Ford's Theatre glowed like a lantern as he approached. The 3-story brick building on 10th Street had become something of a social hub since its renovation 2 years earlier. But tonight it was something more, a symbol, a celebration. The war was over. The president was attending. Every influential man and woman in Washington seemed to be here. What unsettled Elias was how lax the security was. He had expected more. A few Metropolitan Police officers loitered outside, chatting casually, seemingly oblivious to the weight of the moment. No, Union soldiers. No real perimeter, just smiles and music drifting into the street. He studied the people entering. Senators with their wives on their arms, Union officers polished like medals, wealthy civilians eager to be seen in the president's presence. The atmosphere was one of easy confidence. Too easy, Elias thought. Like a stage play where everyone knew their lines, except him. Inside the theatre's crowded lobby, a familiar face pulled Elias's focus. John Parker, one of Lincoln's bodyguards, known less for his vigilance and more for his time spent in local saloons. Tonight, he looked no different. Parker's eyes kept drifting toward the tavern across the street, his duty clearly a secondary concern. Elias frowned. He made a note in his mind, then followed the stream of guests into the theatre. He took a seat in the dress circle, one level below the presidential box. From here, he had a clear line of sight to both the stage and Lincoln's private balcony. The theatre buzzed, with expectation. Silk gowns rustled, fans fluttered. Laughter mingled with murmurs of politics and gossip. Men in dark coats leaned in close, voices low, hands gesturing with quiet intensity. At 8:30 sharp, a subtle stir rolled through the crowd. Heads turned. A moment later, the orchestra launched into Hail to the Chief. The audience rose to its feet as President Lincoln stepped into view. Tall and gaunt in his trademark black suit, he moved with the weary grace of a man who had carried too much for too long. Mary Todd followed closely, radiant and smiling. Behind them were Major Henry Rathbone and his fiancée, Clara Harris. Lincoln paused at the edge of the box and bowed, offering a tired smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The applause thundered around him. As the play began, Elias divided his attention. One part of his mind followed the action on stage, some British farce about mistaken identity, but most of him was scanning the crowd, watching entrances, movements, body language. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, just something. About 20 minutes in, A tall man in a dark coat entered the dress circle. He moved with a relaxed confidence, slipping easily through the crowd, almost unnoticed. But Elias saw him clearly, John Wilkes Booth. Even in profile there was no mistaking him. Handsome, charismatic, and unmistakably theatrical. He carried himself like he was still on stage. But it wasn't Booth himself who made Elias sit forward in his seat. It was the man who intercepted him, a Union officer dressed in full uniform, insignia glinting under the chandeliers, clearly a staff colonel. He stepped in front of Booth near the back wall. The two men exchanged a few words. Quiet, tense, deliberate. Elias couldn't hear them, but the body language was telling. The colonel's jaw was tight, and Booth's expression didn't change, just a faint smirk playing on his lips. Then, the officer handed Booth something. Small, metal, paper. Elias couldn't see clearly. Whatever it was, Booth slipped it into his coat pocket without hesitation. No delay, no questions. It took less than 10 seconds. Then they split. The colonel turned and walked briskly toward the stairwell, not looking back. Elias's heart began to pound. Not the thrill of a story. Something colder, sharper. A feeling he couldn't shake. Something was happening, and it wasn't part of the script. He rose quietly, heart pounding, intending to follow the officer when something caught his eye. A flash of metal near the man's collar. The shape was unmistakable, even from a distance. A phoenix. Small and silver, almost identical to the pin he'd seen days earlier on Senator Baker's lapel. His mind raced, trying to connect the pieces, but there was no time. Booth was already moving. Elias turned his head just in time to see the actor pause outside the entrance to the president's box. He expected to see John Parker standing guard, but the man was nowhere to be found. Booth glanced around, then stepped forward with deliberate calm. He pushed the door open and slipped inside. What happened next tore through the silence like lightning. A single shot cracked through the theatre. Then a scream, sharp, high-pitched, and full of horror. Mary Lincoln's voice, unmistakable. Then chaos. Booth reappeared at the front of the presidential box, and with theatrical flair leapt to the stage below. But as he jumped, his spur caught in a flag draped across the box's edge. A treasury, guard's banner, and he fell hard, landing awkwardly. He winced, but managed to stand, brandishing a knife in one hand and raising his voice in a dramatic shout. "Sic semper tyrannis!" he cried. "Thus always to tyrants!" Gasps turned to screams. People stood frozen, unsure if this was part of the play. Then the shock broke into panic. Women fainted. Men shouted. Ushers tried to maintain order, but it was useless. A voice cried out, "The president's been shot!" From where he stood, Elias had a perfect view into the box. Abraham Lincoln was slumped in his rocking chair, head tilted to the side. Blood darkened the white collar of his shirt, soaking the linen in deep crimson. Elias didn't flinch. While others reacted with terror, his instincts locked in. He watched Booth bolt from the stage, disappearing through the backstage exit. A horse waited, already saddled, reins loose, positioned as if Booth had only stepped away for a moment. No chasing, no tackling, no one even tried. Even more disturbing was the behavior of the guards. A few stood in place, staring dumbly, others hesitated. Too long to be called a reaction. And there, near the shadows at the far side of the stage, Elias spotted him again. The Union colonel. He hadn't run after Booth. He hadn't called for help. He just stood still, watching everything with cold detachment. His face unreadable. Then, without a word, he slipped out a side exit, opposite the one Booth had taken. Elias pushed through the crowd, elbowing his way to that same door. By the time he made it into the alley, the colonel was gone. A stagehand leaned against the wall nearby, trembling, eyes wide and wild. "Booth," he kept repeating. "It was John Wilkes Booth! He shot the president!" Elias grabbed the man by the shoulder. The officer! Did you see where he went? The one Booth was speaking to backstage. A Union colonel. The stagehand looked confused. What officer? The high one with the Phoenix badge. Mister, there weren't no officers back here. Just Booth. Ran out of here like the devil was on his heels. Elias stared down the length of the alley. Nothing. No footsteps. No coattails disappearing into the distance. No sound of boots. The man had simply vanished. Behind him, the theatre was in full collapse. Cries for doctors, someone yelling for soldiers. People stumbled out the doors, white-faced and shaking, some bloodied from being trampled. Elias stepped back into the swelling crowd on 10th Street, moving like a ghost among the chaos. His mind reeled, trying to sort through what he'd seen. Lincoln had been shot, there was no doubt, and Booth had pulled the trigger. But that moment in the dress circle, the exchanged object, the missing bodyguard, the conveniently waiting horse, none of it added up. This wasn't the work of one deranged man. This had been orchestrated. By midnight, Washington had changed. Soldiers now lined the streets. Checkpoints went up. No one moved without being questioned. The crowd had shifted to the Peterson House, just across from the theatre, where the president had been carried in the hope of saving his life. Elias drifted among the people, collecting fragments, half-whispered rumours, frantic confessions, frightened speculation. They tried to kill the vice president too, someone said. I heard Seward was stabbed in his own bed, another whispered. Confederates, they're storming. The city, a woman sobbed. Elias didn't speak. He listened, watched, took note of every official who came and went from the Peterson House. He was there when Stanton arrived, his presence impossible to miss. The Secretary of War moved like a man in command, even as his eyes burned with restrained rage. And with Stanton walking just a step behind was the colonel, the same man from the theatre. He wasn't hiding anymore. The Phoenix insignia gleamed proudly from his coat now, not as a secret, but as if it were military standard. Their eyes locked across the muddy street. Elias felt the gaze cut through him like ice. There was no recognition, no shock at being seen, only a warning, a clear, deliberate message. Stay quiet. Then the colonel followed Stanton into the house where the president lay dying. By the time the bells began to toll at dawn, marking Lincoln's final breath, Elias had filled pages of his notebook. He documented every inconsistency, every unanswered question, every subtle betrayal he'd witnessed with his own eyes. Outside, the city wept. Inside his coat, the pages whispered of a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. He turned and disappeared into the early morning fog, certain of only one thing: this wasn't over. What Elias had witnessed at Ford's Theatre wasn't the reckless act of a lone Southern sympathizer. It felt like the beginning of something much bigger, far more organized. By the morning of April 15th, the entire city of Washington had changed. Church bells rang out like funeral cries. Black crepe hung from windows and balconies like mourning veils. The streets were filled with sobbing women, men standing frozen, in place outside newspaper offices, reading each fresh bulletin as if hoping one might tell them it wasn't true. Elias moved through the city like a shadow. He observed everything, his journalist's instincts sharper than ever. But even as the grief clung to the air, he couldn't ignore what was gnawing at him. The inconsistencies, the gaps between what he had seen and what the newspapers were already reporting. They were calling Booth a Southern fanatic who had acted alone. But Elias had seen more. An officer speaking to Booth backstage, the oddly vacant presidential box, the complete lack of security. And yet none of that made it into print. No mention of the officer. No questioning why the president had been left unguarded. The official story had already hardened like wet cement. Before Lincoln's body had cooled, it was decided. Booth was a vengeful actor, striking a final blow for the South. Elias knew better. He made his way through the grieving city to a small printing shop tucked off East Street. It was run by Heinrich Müller, a stoic German immigrant who had helped Elias print his independent pamphlets all through the war. When Elias stepped through the door, Müller didn't greet him, just looked up, face pale and serious. "I can't print for you anymore, Herr Finch," he said, voice low and strained. Elias frowned. "What happened?" "Men came this morning. Government men." "What men? What did they want?" Müller busied himself rearranging the type tray, though it was already perfectly ordered. His fingers trembled. "They asked about you, about your pamphlet. They took my customer ledger." He glanced toward the shop window, then leaned closer. "They had that look, Finch. The kind of men who break things that can't be fixed." "Did they threaten you?" "They didn't have to." Müller's eyes darted back to the window again. "One of them ran his hand along my press, said, 'Beautiful machine. Would be a shame if something happened to it, or to your immigration papers.'" A slow, familiar heat began to rise in Elias's chest. "I have to print what I saw. The truth about Ford's Theatre." "Not here," Müller said, shaking his head. He pressed a small brass key into Elias's palm. "Back room of Kennedy's tobacco shop. My brother's old press is there. It still works. You can use it. But Finch..." Müller's voice lowered, his eyes steady. "These are dangerous times to question powerful men. Be careful." By late afternoon, Elias had set up in the dusty back room of Kennedy's. The old press smelled of ink and age, but it functioned. He sorted his notes methodically, laying them out on the desk beneath the soft glow of a lantern. His thoughts were sharp, focused. The story was forming in his head. A knock at the door broke the silence. His hand moved instinctively to the revolver in his coat pocket. Then, a soft voice. "Mr. Finch, it's Adelaide Booker. I was at Ford's last night." Elias opened the door cautiously. Adelaide stood there in a worn grey shawl, face drawn with worry. She was in her 40s, a seamstress who had worked at the theatre for years. Elias remembered speaking with her when he was researching a piece on theatre life during the war. "I saw you," she said, stepping inside. "Following that officer, the one with the strange pin." Elias's heart jumped. "What did you see?" "I was backstage, mending a curtain," she said, sitting stiffly on a wooden stool. Booth came in looking nervous. He kept checking his pocket watch. Then that officer entered through the stage door. "That's not normal. Actors come and go there, not officers." "What happened?" They talked quietly. The officer handed Booth something, small, metallic. I couldn't see it clearly. Elias leaned closer. "What did he say?" Adelaide hesitated, then whispered. "He said, 'Remember, wait for the laugh line in Act 3, Scene 2. Not before.'" Then he left. Through the same door, Elias's fingers tightened around his pen. "Could you identify him?" She nodded without hesitation. "Colonel Atticus Wade. I've seen him before at the theatre, always asking questions about who sits where, studying the layout." She pulled, her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "I shouldn't be here. My sister said men have been asking questions about anyone who was working that night." Elias studied her face. Fear lived behind her eyes, but so did certainty. "Thank you," he said softly. "You've done something important." After Adelaide left, Elias dove into his work. He wrote into the night, his fingers smudged with ink, his mind relentless. He detailed everything, what he had seen, what Adelaide had told him, the strange interaction between Booth and the officer, the deliberate timing, the clues everyone else seemed eager to ignore. He titled the piece, "Questions about Ford's Theatre." By midnight, 200 copies were stacked beside the press, ready for distribution, and with them, a spark of resistance. As Elias stepped out into the narrow, rain-slicked alley behind Kennedy's tobacco shop, a shadow shifted in the gloom. He froze, instincts flaring. His hand slipped toward his coat where the revolver rested. "I wouldn't, Finch." The voice stopped him cold, calm, familiar, and edged with authority. There are 3 rifles trained on you right now, the man added. Colonel Simmons stepped into the dim light of the gas lamp, boots crisp on the damp cobblestone, uniform perfect down to the polished brass buttons. His face was as unreadable as ever, eyes flat like glass. "You told me something big was coming," Elias said. "You knew, I suspected," Simmons replied. "That's not the same thing." His gaze drifted to the stack of freshly printed pamphlets under Elias's arm. "Those won't get far," he said flatly. "The city's sealed. There's a man or a rifle on every corner now." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Since when do you care about silencing the truth?" "Since Secretary Stanton declared martial law, an hour ago." Simmons exhaled heavily, the closest he ever came to showing emotion. "The official line is that Booth acted with Confederate conspirators," he continued. "Anything else is a threat to national security in a time of crisis." Elias stared at him in disbelief. "You're part of it. The Order of the Phoenix." There was a pause, barely a flicker, but Elias caught it. A tightening at the corner of Simmons's eye. A flinch. "That name," Simmons said quietly, "isn't to be spoken aloud, especially now." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Listen to me, Finch. What's done is done. Lincoln was a good man, but too soft for what comes next. The South isn't to be forgiven. It's to be erased. The Phoenix understands this. Booth? He was convenient, a loyal madman. He thought he was serving the Confederacy. In reality, he served something much larger. You used him," Elias said bitterly. "We gave the people a villain," Simmons replied, his voice distant, almost regretful. "Now we give them order. Stanton, Wade, Baker. This goes deeper than you think." He reached into his coat and he handed Elias a folded piece of paper. "This was left for you. I'd burn it after reading." Simmons turned and disappeared into the shadows before Elias could say another word. The alley was silent again, empty except for a stray dog rustling through a pile of trash. Overhead, the stars were gone, hidden behind thick clouds swollen with rain. Elias unfolded the paper, his hands cold despite the warm night. The note was written in a careful, elegant hand. "The Phoenix rises from necessary fire. What seems an ending is merely transformation. Those who see too clearly become blinded. EF choose wisely where blindness falls. April 16th, midnight, Congressional Cemetery, Hamilton Plot." When Elias returned to his rented room that night, he found the door unlocked. The place had been torn apart with chilling precision. Drawers emptied and stacked neatly, papers rearranged. Floorboards pried loose and set back in place. Even the mattress had been sliced open from corner to corner. His notes, everything from the past 2 days, were gone. On the desk sat a single newspaper, folded to a small article. "Seamstress at Ford's Theatre found dead, Miss Adelaide. Booker, overcome by grief after witnessing the president's murder, tragically took her own life yesterday evening." Elias felt the air leave his lungs. His skin turned clammy with sweat. Adelaide had been composed when he last saw her. Steady, brave. This wasn't suicide. It was a message. Witnesses disappear as easily as words off a page. The next day blurred. Elias moved cautiously through the streets, careful not to linger or look up too often. Military checkpoints had sprung up overnight like weeds. Men in civilian clothes, detectives surely, watched from alleyways, doorways, behind newspapers. The city's mourning had given way to something colder, fear wrapped in order. The newspapers all ran the same story, identical phrasing, identical layout. Booth, the lone killer, no mention of accomplices, no room for questions. The press had become a chorus, and every voice was singing from the same page. And yet, the manhunt for Booth felt hollow. There was noise, yes, soldiers marching, reports, flying, search parties forming. But Elias noticed the lack of real momentum. It was theatre, a performance for the public. That night, April 16th, As rain began to fall in a fine, steady mist, Elias slipped out and made his way toward Congressional Cemetery. The city's streets were slick and empty, the gas lamps glowing like ghosts through the fog. The Hamilton plot wasn't hard to find. A grand obelisk loomed over a forgotten congressman's grave, rain trailing down its sides like tears. Elias crouched behind a crumbling mausoleum nearby, revolver ready beneath his coat, heart pounding. At exactly midnight, a carriage rolled to a stop just beyond the gate. Its door opened, and a single figure stepped out, holding a lantern. Tall, broad-shouldered, rain sliding off his heavy overcoat. Elias's breath caught. It was Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, the most powerful man in Washington now that Lincoln was dead and Johnson was fumbling in the dark. "Mr. Finch," Stanton called, his voice calm and clear despite the rain. "I know you're here. Let's not play games. If I wanted you dead, you would be." Slowly, Elias stepped out from the shadows, revolver still hidden in his coat. "Like Adelaide Booker," he said coldly. Stanton didn't blink. His expression stayed perfectly composed. The wind hissed through the cemetery, bending the lantern's flame as Stanton set it atop a worn grave marker. Rain misted the marble like sweat on cold skin. "Regrettable," he said, his voice measured, "but necessary. Some people just can't adapt when the world changes." He studied Elias with sharp, calculating eyes. "But you, Mr. Finch, I think you're more practical. Is that why you're here? To figure out my price? Or maybe to offer perspective?" Elias stood still, fists clenched in the pockets of his coat, rain soaking the hem. "I know Lincoln wasn't killed by a lone madman," he said. "I know it was a conspiracy. I know the Order of the Phoenix, whatever it really is, was behind it, and I know you're involved." Stanton gave a small nod, like a professor acknowledging a student's partial answer. "Not inaccurate," he said, "but incomplete." He took a breath, voice lowering. "The Phoenix isn't some cabal of greedy monsters. We're patriots. We do what has to be done. Think of it like surgery. Painful, yes, but done to save the body. And Lincoln was the infection." Elias's jaw tightened. "He was trying to heal the country." "A good man," Stanton agreed, "but his compassion would have undone everything we fought for. His malice toward none would have let the Southern elite slip back into power within a decade. The war would have meant nothing." There was no triumph in Stanton's tone, only cold conviction. Elias felt it land in his gut like ice. "So you had him killed?" Stanton didn't blink. "We had him removed, for the greater good." He took a step closer, raindrops trickling off the brim of his hat. "Reconstruction needs order, discipline. The South has to be rebuilt with a firm hand, not kindness. History is shaped by those who control the story, Mr. Finch. And you could be one of those people." Elias frowned. "You want me to write your version of the truth?" "I want you to be realistic," Stanton said. "You're a talented man. Your article in The Honest Witness showed how much the country needs unity right now, not more division." He reached inside his coat and pulled out a leather portfolio, dark with rain. He set it gently on the gravestone, like an offering. "Inside is a commission. You'd be a special correspondent to the War Department. And there's documentation, evidence to suggest you've been working with us all along." Elias stared at it. "You have a choice," Stanton continued. "Join us. Help shape the truth this nation needs. Or fight us and be erased from the story." He turned and walked back to his carriage. But before he stepped inside, he paused. "One day," he said softly. "When tempers have cooled and the country is ready, maybe the truth can come out. But not now. Not for a long time." The rain came harder, drumming on the roof of the carriage, drowning out his final words. "Choose wisely, Mr. Finch. By tomorrow, there will be no other choices left." Washington wept for 3 days. Thunder rolled over rooftops. Streets turned to rivers. It felt like the sky itself mourned Lincoln. Elias stayed underground, slipping from one safe house to another, protected by a network of informants and dissidents, men and women he'd met during the war. The portfolios Stanton had offered remained unopened, tucked inside his coat like a cursed object, heavy with compromise. On the third night, he met Muller in the cellar of a crumbling church. The minister had once treated wounded Confederates in secret. Now the basement smelled of damp stone and old blood. Muller shook rain from his coat. "The street papers say Booth fled south," he said, "but my cousin, he drives a supply wagon. He says soldiers searched the Surratt boarding house again today, tore the place apart, ripped up floorboards, broke down walls." "They're looking for something," Elias said, narrowing his eyes. "Either something Booth left behind, or something they put there and need to recover." Muller hesitated. "There are rumors about a diary." Elias turned to him sharply. "Booth kept a diary?" "Supposedly," Muller said. "A small red leather book. Wrote in it constantly. His thoughts, his plans. The kind of thing that could name names. Who gave him orders. Who he met with." Elias felt the hairs on his neck stand up. That diary could be the proof, the evidence, the thread that unraveled everything Stanton had built. "Who told you this?" "A clerk at the War Department," Muller said. "Drunk and loose-lipped at Hannigan's Tavern. He said Stanton ordered the place searched himself. Said the secretary looked pale, spooked. If Booth had written down his conversations with members of the Order, Wade, Baker, even Stanton, then everything could change. The lie of the lone assassin would fall apart." "I need to get into the Surratt boarding house," Elias said. Muller blinked. "That's insane. It's guarded. Around the clock." "Nothing's impossible," Elias said. "Only inconvenient." He wasn't just a reporter. He was a survivor of wartime shadows. Someone who had mapped Washington's hidden corners and back-alley whispers. He'd spent years building a network for moments exactly like this. And now, the truth waited for him behind locked doors and bayonets. "Are the old tunnel entrances still accessible?" Elias asked quietly. Muller's eyes widened. "The smuggling tunnels. Maybe some of them. But they haven't been used since the early days of the war. Most are sealed, dangerous, forgotten." But Elias already knew that. Washington's underbelly held secrets that most citizens never imagined. Beneath the city's surface, especially near the Navy Yard and along the riverfront, ran a network of narrow passageways. Smugglers, spies, and even soldiers had used them at the war's outbreak to move weapons, messages, even people. Over time, most of them had been collapsed, buried beneath brick and memory, but not all. And Elias had spent months during the war tracking them, documenting them for a story he never dared to publish. That night, armed with nothing but a dim lantern, a notebook filled with hasty sketches, and his memory, Elias slipped into the shadows behind an abandoned warehouse. In the cellar, behind a false wooden wall stained with mildew, he found it, the entrance, a rusted iron door, sealed tight with age. He pressed his shoulder against it and forced it open. The hinges groaned in protest, and the smell that escaped was thick and rancid, earth, rot, and something older. The tunnel beyond was barely wide enough for a grown man. The walls wept moisture, moss clung to every surface, and the brickwork sagged like tired bones. The ceiling arched low. He had to stoop as he moved, every step echoing faintly ahead, like ghosts warning him back. He counted intersections, every turn carefully matched to the faded map he'd sketched years ago. 10 paces here, left at the collapsed junction, right after the broken gas pipe. For nearly an hour he walked, deeper into the dark beneath the city, the only sound his breathing and the distant drip of water. Finally, his steps slowed. According to his calculations, he was beneath H Street, just below the Surratt boarding house. A metal ladder bolted into the tunnel wall led upward, disappearing into the dark above. Elias paused, heart thudding, then extinguished the lantern. He climbed carefully, hands slick with sweat despite the cold. The rungs creaked with age, but held. At the top, he pushed open a loose hatch and emerged into a cramped, dusty cellar. The air was stale, undisturbed. He swept his lantern across the space. Dust covered everything, old crates, broken chairs, cobwebs thick as cloth. It was clear no one had been here in years. But then he saw it, a single set of boot prints in the dust, leading to a blank wall on the far side of the room. He moved cautiously, studying the bricks. One section of the mortar was cleaner, newer, slightly off in colour. His fingers brushed across it, and he drew his pocket knife, scraping away the surface. A brick came loose with a quiet pop. Inside the cavity, his fingers touched something soft. Leather. He pulled it out slowly, reverently. A small red-bound book, unmarked. His pulse pounded as he opened it. The pages inside were filled with looping, dramatic handwriting, an actor's hand, theatrical and confident. Booth's diary, hidden either by Booth himself or on someone's instruction. Elias tucked the diary into his coat, resealed the wall, and slipped back into the tunnel. He retraced his steps, each turn now charged with a strange electricity. Back in the church cellar, safely hidden from prying eyes and ears, he finally opened the diary again beneath the flickering lamplight. What he read wasn't what he expected. It wasn't a clear blueprint of conspiracy. No names, no master list. It was chaotic, emotional. The frenzied scrawl of a man who saw himself as a martyr. Booth compared himself to Brutus, again and again. "I have struck the tyrant," he wrote, "and history shall remember me not as villain, but saviour." He painted himself as a tragic figure, sacrificing everything to avenge the South. His words were dripping with self-importance. But scattered between the theatrics were fragments that chilled Elias to his core. A March entry read, "Met with W again. He assures me that once it is done, I will be hailed as a hero throughout the South. Arrangements have been made for my escape. I am to follow the route exactly as planned, making contact at each designated safe house until I reach Virginia, and another, more unsettling one from early April. The order has guaranteed my place in history. Their reach extends to the highest levels of government, men whose names I dare not commit to paper. They speak of a reborn nation, purified by fire, a place for true patriots to reclaim our destiny. I am merely the instrument of this necessary transformation." The words felt fevered, fanatical, but they were also revealing. Then came the entry from April 13th, the day before the assassination. Final meeting with CW. He provided the derringer and confirmed the timing. Act 3, Scene 2. During. The laugh line. When the noise will mask the shot. The guard will be absent. This has been arranged. I expressed concern about escaping through the crowded theatre, but CW assured me that certain doors would be unobstructed. He gave me the small token to identify myself to those helping along the escape route. A bronze phoenix, rising from flames. Elias sat in stunned silence. The initials. CW. Was that Colonel Wade? Or someone else? He flipped through the rest of the diary, but nothing more was as specific. No names, no confirmation, just the language of belief, of fate, of revolution. But it was enough to confirm that Booth hadn't acted alone, that doors were unlocked for him, guards conveniently missing, escape routes prearranged, and the phoenix, that same symbol Stanton had mentioned. It wasn't a metaphor, it was literal, a token, a calling card, proof of an organization willing to kill for its version of the future. Elias closed the diary and stared into the flickering light. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was far darker than he had ever imagined. And what of the higher powers Booth hinted at, but never dared name? Everyone suspected Edwin Stanton, Lincoln's Secretary of War, but Booth's diary pointed to something far more complex, a tangled web of interests, Elias Finch read and reread the pages, chilled by what he saw. There were clues about bankers who had thrived during the war, foreign governments wary of Lincoln's vision for a reconstructed South, and even radical Republicans who believed the president was too soft on former Confederates. Fueled by obsession and a creeping sense of dread, Elias began writing what he called The Murder of the Republic, his most damning pamphlet yet. He locked himself in the back room of a sympathetic bookseller's shop and, over the course of 3 sleepless days, connected everything. Booth's cryptic diary entries, his own observations, and the odd behavior of government officials after Lincoln's death. He laid it all out. At the heart of the conspiracy was Stanton himself. Then there was Colonel Atticus Wade, acting as military muscle, Lafayette Baker, head of the National Detective Police, manipulating the flow of information, and 3 cabinet members Elias had come to suspect based on their abrupt policy reversals in the wake of the assassination. On April 24th, just as the first batch of pamphlets rolled off the press, the country was hit with breaking news. John Wilkes Booth had been found and killed, trapped in a tobacco barn in Virginia. He'd reportedly been shot by a soldier who had defied direct orders to bring him in alive. A little too convenient, Elias thought. With Booth dead, the only man who could corroborate any of this was beyond questioning. That night, Elias stayed up adding one last section to his manuscript. He described the suspicious nature of Booth's death in detail. By sunrise on April 25th, 200 copies of The Murder of the Republic sat in neat stacks, the ink still drying. He never got to distribute a single one. Just after dawn, the door crashed open. Wood splintered. 6 men in civilian clothes stormed. In, their movements tight, trained, clearly military. No badges, no names. But Elias knew who led them. He'd seen him before. Lafayette Baker, Elias muttered. The man stepped forward, pistol drawn but lowered. Elias Finch, he said without emotion. You are under arrest for sedition and interference with an active military investigation. Elias's heart pounded, but he stayed composed. He had braced for this. Under whose authority? He asked. Martial law hasn't been declared. Baker gave a cold smile. Special wartime powers. Executive order. After Lincoln's death. Paperwork's just a formality. He raised his chin. You're coming with us. Across town, Maya. Torres rolled her eyes and leaned back in her chair. She'd heard Jason go on like this a dozen times before. MK Ultra, the Montauk Project, time travel, faked moon landings. He treated every conspiracy like a personal mission. But this one felt different. Jason spun his chair to face her. Cut the recording, he said, eyes lit up. Did you get the email? Maya tapped her tablet. Desert Valley Logistics. You got the job. She arched an eyebrow. Background check somehow came back clean. Not somehow, Jason said, grinning like a kid on Christmas. 6 months of work, fake ID, fabricated references, scrubbed digital trail. It all paid off. She wasn't so convinced. Delivering food to a military base isn't exactly sneaking into Area 51. Jason leaned in, his voice dropping. It gets me past the fence. That's more than anyone else has done. The plan had taken shape over the past year. Jason had tracked Desert Valley Logistics, one of the civilian contractors that handled food and supplies for military installations across Nevada, including the Nevada Test and Training Range, where rumors swirled around a certain secretive facility. Maya opened the encrypted files again. Let's run through it one more time. Jason nodded. I start Monday. First few weeks are standard. Routine deliveries, no raised eyebrows. I play it cool. Build trust. Then you start mapping routes, Maya added. Tracking security shifts, gate procedures. While wearing our custom glasses with the built-in microcams, Jason finished. Which, yeah, cost us nearly every cent we had. Maya exhaled. Let's just hope they don't catch on. One slip and you're not just fired, You disappear. Jason's grin faded slightly, but his determination didn't. They won't catch me. This is it, Maya. This is how we finally find the truth. The cameras, embedded in Jason's glasses, transmitted high-resolution footage through a modified digital watch, one that bypassed standard security sweeps. Every frame shot straight to Maya's setup in the van, routed through a maze of encrypted VPNs and satellite uplinks. The whole operation had been meticulously planned for over a year. Jason would play it straight, deliver meals, earn trust, and slowly gather intel without raising eyebrows. Meanwhile, Maya worked from behind the scenes, turning an old van into a fully functioning mobile command center. Inside, signal boosters, backup generators, multiple fail-safe internet connections, and a dead man's switch ready to go live if anything went wrong. This isn't just sneaking around, Maya said one night, scanning code on her laptop. This is federal property, classified. You know what kind of time you're looking at if you get caught. Jason looked up from his notes, his face hardening. You know why I'm doing this, right? She sighed. For views? Subscribers? No. He turned to a corkboard on the wall, plastered with yellowing newspaper clippings, red string linking photographs, forum screenshots and scribbled notes. At the center was a photo, his father in military fatigues, smiling faintly. My dad worked at Groom Lake, 12 years. Then one day, he came home with a splitting headache. 2 months later, stage 4 brain cancer. No history of it in our family. Maya's eyes softened. Jason. He tried to tell my mum something before he died, Jason continued, his voice quieter now, rough around the edges. He was on so many meds she thought he was hallucinating. But he said there were things. Not from here, in the sky. Things he'd seen. He was trying to warn us. You believe him, she said, more statement than question. I know he was telling the truth. He looked away. And I need proof. Maya closed her laptop and nodded slowly. All right. The footage goes straight to a secure server. If anything happens, it gets pushed to 17 platforms. Instant upload. No way to stop it once it's triggered. Dead man's switch, Jason said. Not exactly comforting, she muttered, but didn't push it. The next 6 weeks blurred into a routine of careful, relentless preparation. Jason faded into the background at work, just another guy in a uniform delivering boxed meals to heavily guarded installations. He memorized routines, access points, guard habits. Quiet, professional, invisible. Meanwhile, Maya camped out in the desert, fine-tuning every inch of the van. Redundant power systems, camouflaged antennas, triple encrypted firewalls. They ran drills almost every night. They practiced emergency shutdowns, planned escape routes. The cameras transmitted flawlessly, clear video, stable audio. Everything was ready. Jason's online presence dipped, drawing concern from his fan base. He offered only vague hints. Researching something big. The truth is coming. Some secrets can't stay buried. It worked. The suspense only grew. His subscriber count ticked past 1 million. He barely noticed. 2 days before the infiltration, Maya found Jason sitting alone in the van, staring at a creased photo of his father. We can still walk away, she said softly, sitting beside him. Jason shook his head. We've come too far. And if there's nothing there, she asked. If it's just another military base, then I'll say that. I'll tell the truth. But it's not. He turned to her, eyes sharp. You remember that trucker who posted about what he saw last month? Late night delivery, weird aircraft movements, people on the tarmac with, what did he call them? Non-standard physical characteristics. Maya nodded. She remembered. The post had blown up on a fringe conspiracy forum before it vanished completely. Account deleted, thread wiped. It was gone within hours. Could have been fake, she said. Could have been, Jason agreed. Or it could be the confirmation we've been waiting for. That night, neither of them slept. Jason ran through the infiltration steps again and again. Maya checked every line of code, every signal feed. When she spoke, it was only in technical confirmations. "Camera feeds are good," she said. "Audio's clean, encrypted channels live." Jason stood in the doorway of the van, unusually quiet. "Having second thoughts?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. Then, "No, just thinking this might be the most important thing we ever do." She reached out and squeezed his hand. "Stick to the plan. Get in. Record what you can. Get out. No hero stuff." Jason gave a half smile. "Yes, Mom." They didn't say what they were both thinking. That by this time tomorrow, they might have uncovered one of the biggest secrets in modern history. Or vanished completely, without a trace. The sun climbed over the Nevada desert, lighting up an endless stretch of sand and scrub. The air was dry, the silence absolute. Somewhere behind the horizon, under steel gates and layers of classified silence, the truth waited. And Jason was going to find it. Maya's voice came through the earpiece, steady despite the rising tension. "You've got this, Jason. Stick to the plan." Jason's grip tightened on the steering wheel as he followed the painted line toward Delivery Point Charlie. The truck's tires hummed against the asphalt, but inside the cab, the silence was thick. Every breath, every shift of his eyes was being recorded, watched live by nearly 300 people now. Each viewer, an unseen witness. To them, it was thrilling. For Jason, it was real and dangerous. Up ahead, the complex loomed. From a distance, it had a manufactured normalcy. Warehouses, water towers, trucks idling. But as Jason pulled closer, the facade began to crack. Hangars without visible doors. Structures with mirrored surfaces that seemed to distort under the sun. Tall antennas rising from the sand like alien spires, pulsing with unseen frequencies. Approaching Charlie now, Jason whispered. "Still good on all signals," Maya replied. "No interference yet." He pulled the truck into a wide unloading bay marked with faded white paint and stepped out, clipboard in hand. 2 military personnel emerged from a nearby doorway. These weren't the same as before. They moved with practiced precision, eyes scanning everything, faces unreadable. "Delivery for mess," Jason said, keeping his voice casual, tone deferential. The taller of the 2 guards took the clipboard, flipping through the manifest. "Unload the crates at Dock 4, he said. "Then wait in the cab for further instruction." Jason nodded. "Understood." He moved to the rear of the truck and began unloading the boxes, just like every other week. Canned goods, dry rations, kitchen supplies, all real, all approved. The infiltration wasn't in the cargo, but in the cracks between protocol. Once the guards retreated, Jason stepped behind the truck briefly, out of sight of the cameras he'd already mapped. He reached under the rear bumper and pressed a hidden button. A small hatch opened behind a pallet, revealing a black case the size of a lunchbox. He grabbed it, slipped it into the oversized side pocket of his uniform pants, and casually returned. To the cab. "Maya," he whispered. "Package retrieved. Switching to phase 2. "Got it," she replied. "No alerts. You're good for 2 minutes." Phase 2 was a gamble. The map Jason had built from fragmented forums, whistleblower tips, and blurred satellite images suggested there was a utility corridor behind Building 12 that connected to the main hangar. It wasn't on any delivery route and wasn't part of his clearance zone, but it was their best shot. Jason restarted the truck, slowly edging toward the designated turnaround point, then feigned a stall. He killed the engine, opened the hood, and stepped out again, pretending. To inspect the problem, it bought him 30 seconds. When no one came running, he ducked behind the truck and sprinted toward the back of Building 12, slipping through the narrow space between its corrugated walls and the fencing. "Maya, I'm in the gap. Still good?" "Still good," she confirmed. "But I'm starting to see some spikes in signal noise. Could be nothing, or could be scanners picking us up." Jason reached a reinforced door partially hidden behind an external HVAC system. Just as they'd hoped, It had an old keypad access unit, standalone, not wired to the central system. He pulled out the black case. Inside, a cloned access chip, heat-sensitive fingerprint film, and a tiny injection mold to replicate a 4-digit press pattern. All acquired over months through delivery drop-offs and data skimming. It worked. The door clicked. Jason pulled it open and slipped inside. He was in. The corridor was dimly lit, lined with exposed piping and labelled conduits. A maintenance access way. The kind of place that no one thinks to guard until someone does exactly what Jason was doing. His glasses streamed everything. Pipes marked thermal coolant, panels labelled bio-storage level 2. The deeper he went, the stranger it became. Fluorescent lights gave way to a faint blue glow from the floor panels. He passed a door that required retina scans and palm codes. Clearly, above any clearance he'd ever possess. "Maya," he breathed. "You seeing this?" "Every second," she replied. Her voice had dropped to a whisper, as if volume mattered across distance. "Jason, there's a server room on your left coming up. Try to get a visual. We're almost at 700 viewers." Jason turned the corner and froze. The hallway ended in a room bathed in cold light. Through a glass panel, he saw something that made his chest tighten. Inside, a humanoid figure floated in a vertical tube. Roughly 5 feet tall, hairless greyish-blue skin stretched tight over a frail frame. Its eyes were too large, its limbs too thin. Tubes ran from its torso into the surrounding machinery. Jason stumbled back slightly. "Maya, are you seeing this?" A long silence. Then, I think so. Jesus, Jason, is it real?" "I don't know." He stepped closer to the glass. The being wasn't moving, could be dead, could be preserved. Then its eyes opened. Jason staggered backward, nearly falling. "It just looked at me." "Jason, your signal's starting to distort," Maya said, panic rising. "Something's scrambling it. Half the feed's going static." "I'm leaving," Jason gasped. "I got the footage. I'm heading out." He retraced his steps quickly, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the quiet hum of the corridor. He slipped out the utility door, retraced the path back to his truck, and restarted the engine. "Still with me?" he asked. "I lost your video feed, but I've got audio. Can you get out the same way you came?" "Yeah," he said, merging back onto the designated route. "I'm heading to the gate. Act normal. Copy. I've started uploading everything we captured so far to the backup servers. Auto trigger is ready if we go dark." As Jason approached the second checkpoint, he saw guards waiting. Not routine guards. These were tactical. Black uniforms. Helmets. No insignia. Jason's throat tightened. "Maya," he whispered. "We may have a problem." The delivery route brought Jason to a quiet loading dock tucked behind what looked like an old commissary building. He eased the truck into position like he'd done 100 times before, backing it up to the platform with practiced precision. As the engine idled, he reached for the clipboard and hopped out. "Routine delivery," he called out to the 2 men waiting by the dock. "Got 26 crates today." One of them, Gaza, a big guy with tired eyes and sweat patches under his arms, gave a quick nod. Jason recognized him from previous drop-offs. "We'll take it from here," Gaza said gruffly, already stepping toward the truck. This was the moment. Normally, Jason would stay outside, watch them unload, but not today. He casually flipped through the clipboard. "Actually," he said, glancing up, "I've got to verify the cold storage items myself. New company policy since that spoilage incident last month." Gaza stopped and frowned, clearly annoyed, but then let out a resigned grunt. "Fine, follow me." Exactly what Jason needed. An invitation inside. He kept his stride relaxed, eyes scanning everything as they passed through the double doors. Pipes ran overhead. A faint hum filled the air. He was mentally sketching the layout with each step. "Feed still good," he whispered. Once Gaza moved a few feet ahead of him, "Perfect," came Maya's voice in his earpiece. "But Jason, be careful. This is already further than we mapped out for Phase 1. They entered a large industrial kitchen, steel counters, prep stations, crates of vegetables stacked high. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. Gaza led him through another metal door into a walk-in refrigerator. Cold air rushed over Jason's skin. He did his best impression of a diligent inspector, checking thermometer readings, examining packaging, all while the tiny camera in his glasses captured every detail. "Looks good," he said after a minute. Then, as casually as possible, "Hey, is there a restroom I can use before I go?" Gaza wiped his hands on a stained apron and pointed. "Down that hallway. First door on the left." "Thanks." Jason's pulse was already thudding in his ears. The second Gaza turned away, he veered right instead of left, heading deeper into the building. His steps were calm, deliberate. He needed to look like he belonged here. "Jason." Maya's voice cracked into his ear again, tense now. "What are you doing? This isn't the plan." "Change of plans," he whispered. "I might not get another shot like this." The hallway stretched out ahead, white walls, beige linoleum floors, flickering overhead lights. A corkboard displayed faded safety posters, schedules, and a memo about hairnets. Totally ordinary. 600 viewers now, Maya said. Word spreading. He hit a junction where things shifted. The new corridor had darker walls, almost charcoal black, with no windows and a quiet, sterile feel. At the entrance stood a keypad security lock, blinking softly. "Dead end," he muttered, turning on his heel. Then the door clicked open. Woman in a lab coat stepped out, eyes glued to a tablet. She didn't notice him until he spoke. Excuse me," Jason said, adopting a confused tone. "I think I'm lost. Trying to get back to the loading dock." She looked up, startled. "How did you even get in here?" Jason pointed vaguely over his shoulder. "I'm with the food delivery. First time at this location." Her eyes narrowed, skeptical. "This area's restricted. You're not supposed to be here." "Sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to wander. Go back the way you came. Second left. Follow the signs." "Will do," Jason nodded, already watching her fingers. She turned, stepping away, and left the door ajar. The magnetic lock hadn't clicked. "Jason, don't," Maya said immediately. "I know what you're thinking. Don't do it." But he was already moving. With a soft push, he slipped through the door before it sealed. The moment it clicked shut behind him, he let out a shaky breath. "I'm in," he whispered, heart racing. "And Maya, you won't believe what I'm seeing." "Define what you're seeing," Maya said sharply, "and start moving back toward the exit, now." But Jason just stood there, frozen. This wasn't like the rest of the facility. The corridor ahead felt wrong. The walls weren't drywall or concrete. They were some kind of strange metal, dull, almost slate-colored, but with a faint internal glow, not a reflection. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like it was breathing. He turned in place, letting the glasses capture everything. "There are no doors," he whispered. "No junctions, just this one hallway." The lights above were recessed into the ceiling, casting a low amber hue that made everything look surreal. The whole place smelled faintly of antiseptic and ozone. "Viewer count just past 1,000, Maya said. "The stream's spreading like wildfire. Jason, you have to get out now." He didn't answer. Something about this corridor. It wasn't just strange. It was intentional, purposeful, built to hide something, or to keep something in. And for the first time since he stepped inside, Jason wasn't sure if he wanted to know what that something was. "But Jason, seriously," Maya's voice cracked with urgency. "You need to retreat. This wasn't part of the plan." "I can't," Jason murmured, his voice low and awed as he took another step forward. "Not when I'm this close." The floor beneath his boots vibrated with a faint, almost imperceptible hum. It felt alive, like something deep below was stirring. With each step, the air grew colder, dense with an unnatural chill. His breath fogged in front of him, curling into wispy clouds that vanished just as quickly as they formed. "There are markings on the walls now," he whispered. He leaned closer, letting the tiny lenses in his glasses zoom in. Symbols, etched deep into the strange glowing metal, lined the corridor. "They're not English, not Latin. I don't recognize any of it." "Jason, security's going to notice you're missing any second," Maya warned, her voice tight with anxiety. "Wait." Jason froze mid-step. "Do you hear that?" Maya paused, and then she did. Through the feed, a low harmonic hum emerged, soft, rhythmic. It wasn't machinery, it wasn't air conditioning. It sounded almost melodic, like something singing in a frequency just beyond human comprehension. "What is that?" she whispered. "I don't know," Jason replied, barely moving his lips as he advanced. "But I think I'm about to find out." The hallway curved gently, then opened into a wide, circular chamber. Jason stepped through the threshold and stopped dead in his tracks. At the center of the room hovered a structure unlike anything he had ever seen. Suspended 3 feet off the ground, it was roughly spherical but uneven, like something grown rather than built. It glowed faintly from within, pulsing blues and violets under a skin-like membrane that seemed both organic and technological. "Maya, are you seeing this?" Jason's voice trembled. "Tell me you're recording." "I'm recording," she confirmed quickly, her earlier skepticism replaced with stunned silence. "But Jason, what the hell is that thing?" "I don't know, but it's not man-made." The object floated without support, slowly rotating. Appendages, thin, translucent, jointed, slid out from its surface, extending and retracting like antennae, gently probing the air. "It's reacting to me," Jason said softly. The light patterns, they changed when I stepped in. Around the perimeter of the chamber, sleek computer stations and racks of scientific equipment formed a tight ring. Jason approached one console, his glasses locking onto the displays. Data scrolled rapidly across the screen. Unfamiliar measurements, energy readings, diagrams that looked like DNA strands twisted with circuitry. "This is it, Maya," Jason said, his voice suddenly steady, filled with quiet conviction. "This is what my father meant when he talked about Phase Omega. This isn't a ship or some secret tech. It's alive, or it wants us to think it is." "Jason, please," Maya said, her voice softer now. "Just be careful." He walked a slow circle around the entity, documenting every angle. The walls of the chamber were covered in more symbols, etched deeper, arranged with purpose. They reminded him of celestial charts, but nothing matched known constellations. "These look like star maps," he murmured. "But they're not ours. These systems, they're too far out." The humming deepened, vibrating in Jason's bones. Frost crept across the metal floor beneath his feet. The cold was no longer subtle. It clung to his skin, sank into his lungs. Every breath felt heavier. "We're at 2,000 viewers," Maya said, breathless. "People are flooding the stream. Comments are flying. Some think it's a hoax. Others are freaking out." "It's real," Jason said firmly. He extended his hand slowly toward the floating entity. "I can feel the static in the air. It's like standing near a power station in winter. There's a charge. Something's waking up." He was just inches from the membrane when a calm, male voice echoed behind him. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Jason whipped around, startled. A man stood in the doorway he had entered through, mid-40s, unassuming. Round glasses, thinning hair, white lab coat. He didn't look surprised, didn't seem alarmed. He was just observing. "You don't have clearance to be here," the man said, voice calm, almost polite. He didn't reach for an alarm, didn't yell for security. Jason didn't back down. "What is that thing?" he demanded, jerking his thumb at the floating entity. The man tilted his head slightly. "That's classified," he said plainly, then added, "But you already knew that, didn't you?" "Mr. Reeve," Jason's blood ran cold. He hadn't used his last name today. Hadn't even introduced himself. "You know who I am." "We've been watching your channel," the man said, stepping into the chamber with unhurried ease. "Your theories, your videos. You've gotten close before, but this is further than we expected." "We?" Jason asked, heart thumping, retreating half a step. "The project team," the man answered, brushing a bit of lint from his sleeve. "Though I suspect you're more interested in that," he said, nodding toward the floating structure, "than who we are." Jason's mind raced. Every piece of research, every rumor, every redacted report he'd ever pored over, it had all led to this. And now, standing just feet from undeniable proof, the strangest thing wasn't the alien entity in front of him. It was how calm the man behind him was. Too calm. The glow from the entity intensified, its tendril-like limbs twitching, faster, restless, almost agitated. Jason instinctively took a step back, his pulse quickening. "Is it alive?" he asked, the journalist in him pushing past the fear gnawing at his gut. "In a sense," the scientist replied, calm despite the tension in the air. "But not in any way we'd define as living. It exists across multiple states, maybe even multiple dimensions." Jason's eyes widened. "And you're studying it?" "We're communicating with it," the scientist corrected gently. "Trying to anyway. It's complicated." Jason's mind reeled. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a revelation. Not only proof of something alien, but that someone had been talking to it. "How long has it been here?" "Since 47, the scientist answered, almost casually. "Though not exactly in this form, it's been evolving." Suddenly, a blaring alarm cut through the silence. Red warning lights began flashing in the hallway just outside the chamber. "That would be security," the scientist muttered with a resigned sigh. "I was hoping we'd have more time." "Time? For what?" Jason asked, slowly moving toward the far side of the room, eyeing a possible exit. "To explain," the scientist said, voice steady. "There are things you should understand before you blast this to the public." He nodded toward Jason's glasses. "Yes, I know you're streaming. That's why I approached you instead of having them drag you out." Jason hesitated, suspicion flickering across his face. "Why? Why tell me anything?" The scientist turned and pointed at the pulsating entity. "Because it wants me to," he said quietly. "It's been waiting for someone like you." Before Jason could respond, the entity flared with brilliant, searing light, so intense it made him squint and shield his face. In his earpiece, Mia's voice crackled. "Jason, something's wrong with the feed. It's glitching." The object suspended in mid-air began spinning faster. Its outer membrane thinned, becoming translucent. Within, Jason could see what looked like a living machine, organic structures, woven into incomprehensible technology. It was elegant and terrifying. "What's happening?" Jason asked, his voice rough with awe and fear. The scientist's eyes gleamed. "Contact," he whispered. "It's never done this before." A piercing tone erupted from the entity, so sharp and sudden it forced Jason to his knees, hands clutching his ears. Then, just as suddenly, he heard a voice, but not with his ears. It wasn't in English, not any language at all. Yet somehow, he understood every word. "You have found us at last," Jason gasped. "Mia, are you getting this?" "Audio's distorted," she answered, panic in her tone. "Viewer counts exploding, 20,000 and climbing, but the stream's barely holding together." The entity throbbed with light, casting eerie, shifting shadows across the chamber walls. The scientist stood still, staring at it as if mesmerized. "We have waited," the voice said again, echoing through Jason's thoughts. "Through many turns of your sun, for one who would see." "See what?" Jason asked aloud, not sure if he needed to speak for the voice to hear. "The truth that lives between worlds." The scientist had moved to a nearby console, typing furiously. "This is unprecedented," he murmured. In 75 years of research, it's never communicated like this. Outside, the alarms kept screaming. Yet strangely, no one had entered the room. No security, no shouting, nothing. Just Jason, the scientist, and the thing hanging in the air. Jason glanced anxiously at the doors, then back to the entity. "What are you?" In response, the creature's appendages extended, weaving themselves into a complex geometric form, beautiful and alien. The air grew colder. Jason's breath fogged in front of him, and he felt frost forming on his eyelashes. "We are observers," the voice said, "collectors of knowledge, travelers through what you call possibility." "Aliens," Jason breathed, barely able to say the word. "No," the voice corrected. "Not alien, not foreign. We have always been here, in the spaces between what you perceive as real." The scientist let out a quiet, almost bitter laugh. "That's what we've been trying to explain to the higher-ups for decades. They're not from another planet. They're from somewhere else, another dimension that overlaps ours." The entity pulsed again, this time with a rhythm that felt affirming. "You see 3 dimensions," it continued. "Occasionally, you glimpse a 4th. We exist in many more." Jason's mouth had gone dry. "And you've been here since 1947. A fragment of us emerged then," the voice explained. "When your weapon tore open the veil between forms of being." Jason's skin crawled. He could barely process what he was hearing. Nuclear testing. Roswell. It wasn't just conspiracy theory. It was the origin. The thing in the air pulsed. Again, slower now. Controlled. Watching. Jason looked at the scientist, then back at the entity. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. The scientist didn't answer. The entity did. "Now you choose." The scientist stood with a grim expression, voice low but steady. The Trinity test, and the others that followed. They did more than unleash nuclear force. They caused quantum disturbances we still don't understand. Not fully. Jason's stomach turned. The implications sank in slowly, like poison. "So, Roswell," he murmured, eyes wide. "It wasn't a spacecraft crash. It was a tear, a point where something slipped through." "A dimensional incursion," the scientist nodded. "Something came through, or at least part of something." Jason stared at the strange glowing entity suspended in the chamber. It pulsed with a light that felt alive. "Maya," he whispered into his earpiece. "Are you hearing this?" Her voice came through faintly, layered with static. "Partially. The signal's degrading. But Jason, something's happening. I'm picking up military chatter. Emergency channels are lighting up. Movement everywhere." Jason turned to the scientist, 100 questions swirling. "Why now? Why tell me all this now, after everything?" The man looked exhausted. "I don't know. It's never communicated directly before. It let us observe it, run tests, but never talk. Never like this." Jason felt something shift in his mind. A presence, not his own. A voice, calm yet unearthly, echoed within him. "Because you are the messenger, the one who will speak the truth." Jason's breath caught. "It's using me as a conduit, through my live stream, through my followers." As if to confirm it, the entity's light flared, morphing into intricate shapes, mathematical patterns, surreal but vaguely familiar. Equations, models, visions of multi-dimensional space. "It's showing me." Jason faltered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I think these are coordinates, or maybe predictions, probabilities." The scientist leaned in, his face illuminated by the strobing glow. "What does it mean?" he asked, not quite sure if he was speaking to Jason or the thing. "Your weapons tear reality again," the voice whispered in Jason's mind. "Not by force, by watching. Observation distorts the observed." The scientist's eyes widened. Quantum observation theory. But, on a cosmic scale, the air grew heavy. The lights dimmed. The sky darkens. The entity continued. They come through the tears. Jason's heart pounded. Who? Who's coming? The reply didn't come in words. Instead, a surge of images filled Jason's mind. Silent, horrifying impressions of things moving between stars. Colossal beings, incomprehensible shapes drifting through voids far beyond human perception. They shimmered in wavelengths that didn't fit any spectrum. Others, Jason breathed. Other beings, not like this one. Something worse. The others do not watch, the voice said. They consume. The scientist had gone pale, lips trembling. It's not just a message, it's a warning. Jason turned to him, voice trembling. A warning about what? A shrill alarm blared before the entity could respond. It was different, deeper, urgent, terrifying in its unfamiliarity. Red emergency lights flashed in unnatural patterns. Not normal drills, something new. The scientist spun toward the sound, panic twisting his features. They've triggered containment protocols. Full lockdown. Because of me? Jason asked, stunned. The man shook his head slowly. No, because of that. He pointed to the entity. It was changing. The once gentle pulses of violet and blue now twisted into shades of crimson, its form vibrating like a disturbed reflection. The voice inside Jason's head cracked, fragmented. Too late. The tear is opening. They sense me. They are coming. Maya's voice broke through the chaos, her signal distorted. Jason, something's jamming the whole grid. We're losing the feed. Everything's breaking. The entity writhed violently. One of its glowing tendrils slashed through a control console, sending sparks flying and killing the screen instantly. It's phase shifting, the scientist muttered, stumbling backward. Losing cohesion in this reality. Without warning, the chamber doors burst open. Armed personnel stormed in, not standard military. These men wore black containment suits with insignia Jason didn't recognize. Their weapons looked custom, designed for things not quite human. Down! On the ground now! One of them barked. Jason raised his hands but didn't kneel. People need to see this, he said, nodding toward the smart glasses he wore. They're watching, thousands of them. Not anymore, the leader said coldly. All outbound signals have been blocked. Jason looked to the scientist. The older man gave a small, solemn nod. It was true. It doesn't matter, Jason said defiantly. The stream went through relays, backups. You can't erase what's already out there. The entity suddenly let out a high-pitched whine, shrill enough to make the soldiers flinch. Lights flickered. The entire room shimmered like asphalt under a scorching sun. Jason felt the floor under him tremble, not physically, but as if reality itself were shaking loose. And the crimson glow of the entity deepened, throbbing like a heartbeat from beyond the stars. Tell them, the voice urged inside Jason's mind, fainter now, as if echoing from across a great void. The sky has changed. The stars, they move. They come. Jason swayed, fighting to keep his focus. His skin felt electrified, tingling with something deeper than fear. Sir, one of the soldiers said, turning to the scientist. Project. Overthrow has been authorized. We've been ordered to move you to a secure site immediately. The scientist froze. His face went pale, lips parting without sound. That protocol hasn't been activated since '79. Jason blinked at him, trying to catch up. What the hell is Project Overthrow? The scientist looked at Jason for a long second before answering. A dimensional reset. They're going to try and sever the connection. Jason glanced at the entity, still floating, but warping, flickering like a dying star. And what happens to it? It gets pushed back, the scientist said softly, along with anything else that doesn't belong in this dimension. Jason didn't need clarification. The unspoken message rang loud in his ears. That could mean me too. He tapped the side of his glasses. Maya, he whispered. If you're hearing this, download everything. Rip the stream, mirror it, share it everywhere. Don't let them bury this. The soldiers encircled him now, rifles raised, visors hiding their expressions. Jason Reeve, the lead agent said, voice clipped and formal. You are hereby detained under National Security Directive 133. Surrender all recording devices immediately. Jason didn't move. You can try to shut this down, but the truth is out. People saw it. Suddenly the entity screamed, not just through sound, but through something deeper. A wave of force blasted through the chamber, a shrill psychic cry that hit everyone at once. Jason dropped to his knees. The soldiers collapsed. Even the scientist clutched his head, groaning. Remember, the voice whispered inside Jason's, collapsing consciousness. The sky used to be bluer. His vision dimmed. The last thing he saw was the entity imploding, its form collapsing inward into a swirling vortex of light and darkness that bent the room around it. Walls twisted, shadows lengthened. Then, nothing. Darkness swallowed him. 3 days later, Maya, Torres sat in her cluttered apartment, surrounded by glowing monitors and the stink of 3-day-old coffee. Her eyes were bloodshot, ringed with dark circles. She hadn't slept. Couldn't. She hit play again on the footage she'd managed to salvage. Jason, the entity, the collapse. The feed had cut out precisely 73 minutes after Jason entered the restricted, zone. The final moments, Jason staggering, the soldiers storming in, the vortex forming, had been seen by over 50,000 viewers before it went dark. Then came the clampdown. Official statements claimed the video was a hoax, a viral prank, doctored CGI. Platforms flagged and pulled the footage within hours. Social media blocked the hashtags. News outlets didn't even mention it. But the stream kept resurfacing. Fragmented clips uploaded to obscure forums, back-alley video mirrors, dark net drops. Each time, it was pulled. Maya had been uploading to any place that would take it. She leaned back and rubbed her temples. They can't erase it all, she whispered. It had become her mantra. Too many people saw. Her phone buzzed. Another takedown notice. She barely reacted, just added it to the folder. It wasn't about fighting anymore. It was about preserving. Maya stared at her main monitor, where she'd been scrubbing the footage frame by frame. Something strange happened in those last seconds. The way the air around the entity distorted, the color bleed, the spatial warping. It wasn't special effects. It couldn't be. No team could have fabricated this in real time. She had tried calling Jason for hours after the event. No answer. She messaged every account, reached out to contacts, even phoned Desert Valley Logistics directly. All she got were generic responses, or silent redirects. Jason Reeve had vanished, as if he'd never existed. Her eyes flicked to the timestamp of the last recorded frame, Jason falling, the vortex expanding, the soldiers freezing mid-step. A knock at the door jolted her. She stared, heart suddenly pounding. No one should know she was here. Slowly, cautiously, she approached the door and peeked through the peephole. A delivery person stood there, holding a small package. "Delivery for Torres," the voice called out casually. She hesitated. "I didn't order anything," the person shrugged. "Just doing my job, ma'am." They held out a digital pad and a padded envelope. Maya didn't unchain the door. She signed through the gap and took the package, shutting and bolting the door immediately after. Her name was printed in block letters across the envelope. No return address. She stood in the center of the apartment, just staring at it. Fingers trembling, she opened it. A single USB drive fell into her palm, black. Unmarked, ordinary. She didn't trust it, not fully, but she also knew exactly what to do. She crossed the room and powered up her isolated workstation, a system completely air-gapped from the internet, designed specifically for analyzing files too risky to view on any connected device. As the machine booted, She sat down and whispered to herself, "Let's see what they don't want us to know."